my fellow Americans, let me begin by congratulating the team at NASA and our brave astronauts on the successful launch of Artemis 2. It was quite something. It will be traveling further than any manned rocket has ever flown and will very substantially pass the moon, go around it, and come back home from a distance that has never been done before. It's amazing.
Roger, roll pitch. Integrity, AMT high.
Due to that suit being pressurized and expanded, as well as the umbilicals being connected.
We are now falling to the moon rather than rising away from Earth. It is an amazing milestone.
We are standing by for the Integrity crew aboard Orion to surpass the Apollo 13 record.
Integrity, we're now resuming operational audio contact.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good morning, yes, welcome. It's Ian Collins in for Jeremy Carr. We're on day 2 of 2 weeks' worth of cover. So much to get into this morning. Your help along the way, please. As you will be aware, phase 1 of that report into the Southport attack has now been published. The chair of the inquiry, Sir Adrian Fulford, released an 800-page report. It makes for disturbing reading. Who is to blame, ultimately? Multiple elements. Number one, the parents. Should parents be held criminally responsible for their children? In this case, when you read the details, absolutely yes. And the head teacher who was told to revise her description of Rudy Cabana when she wrote that she had concerns about him. She was told that her attitude towards the risk that he posed was because she perceived him to be a black boy with a knife. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. These were all turning points where things could have been avoided. She was also told not to describe him as sinister, another massive turning point. Details on that to come. Also this morning, Donald Trump has had a row with the Pope. I mean, who gets the hump with the Pope? This was during a row with Pope Leo, where the American president also released an image depicting himself of Jesus. Mr. Trump went, no, that wasn't meant to be Jesus. That was me as a doctor. But there was no the distinct absence of a stethoscope, I think, and any other doctor-related accoutrements, I think, was the clue that this was not a doctor. He then deleted the post, which is unusual for Donald Trump. We'll have more on that story. Also, this morning, French police are yet again accused of doing naff all, as several cops in Calais, that's a show waiting to happen, were seen idly looking on as migrants waded into the French Sea, bound for a shiny new life in the UK. Is there any end to the ineptitude of these characters? We'll have more on that as well. And guess what? Shrinkflation is back. Mars bars have just got a whole lot smaller. They've reduced the size from 51 grams to 40 grams. Mars says the move reflected new ways that consumers are snacking. No, we're paying the same for less. What else have you noticed that has got a whole lot smaller. We'll have more on that as well. Everything you need to know. We'll bring you all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. Drop us a voice note there as well. We've got the serious stuff, the crucial stuff, and a bit of light thrown in there as well. And you can message 87222. Peter Blexley, former Met detective, is with us in the studio. Morning, Peter.
Good morning.
Good to see you. It is a disturbing day. I know we spoke yesterday around this story as we awaited for the release of Phase 1 of the Southport report. It pulls no punches, really. It's incredibly diligently put together by the chair of the inquiry. But I mean, to say it makes for disturbing reading, mostly because there wasn't just one, but many opportunities that could have stopped this man, this kid, from carrying out this horrific attack.
This monster, and he was described as a monster yesterday, and that's a very, very apt and accurate description of him. But let's just travel 118 miles south of Southport, shall we, to Nottingham, because there is an ongoing inquiry in Nottingham into the activities, the murderous activities, of Valdo Callacane, who murdered 3 people, Ian Coates, Barney Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar, and left others with lifelong injuries. And there are going to be sickening, shocking, but also, not surprising, similarities. We have public services now who are in the grip of a real woke mindset, which they have to break free from. Now, of course, Sir Adrian Fulford didn't use the word woke yesterday. It's my choice of word, and it's very deliberate. They are in the grip of this mindset whereby if they just tick a box, take the path of least resistance and move on, then everything's fine as they see it, until, of course, when it isn't. And that's the same can be applied in both cases, but particularly yesterday to the parents. I mean, yes, criminally responsible, they should be held criminally responsible. But the educators that did exactly that, ticked the box, moved on. The Prevent programme did exactly that. Oh, doesn't quite match the ideology of the description that Prevent work under. Utter nonsense. Move on. The police stopped him on more than one occasion, in possession of a knife, intending to carry out harm to people. And if they'd arrested him, instead of box ticking in a very, very woke way, because they don't want to criminalise children, what utter drivel, them, the educators, the social services, again, the whole lot of them, they will not grip a situation. And I use this word because it's very, very apposite, and I see it happening and I hear about it happening. In our public services, they do not grip a situation, because if you do that, then it by very nature of the word, you have to deal with it thoroughly. You have grasped it, you have gripped it, you will deal with it properly and to the nth degree. And with the pressures that so many of the public services are under, with them crying that they haven't got enough numbers and they haven't got enough money, they want their people to just tick that box, move on. If you grip something, as a police officer, you're going to arrest someone. As counter-terrorism, you're probably going to arrest someone. As an educationist, you're going to upscale it. And then you, the operative, becomes the problem, not the subject, because you won't just tick the box and move on. There is a distinct lack of grip, polluting all our public services.
No, what they called it, the inquiry chair, Sir Adrian Fulford, called it the absence of risk ownership. No one took command or leadership. So they all knew there was a problem, but each different agency, whether it was Prevent, whether it was the police, whether it was the educators, social service, they all kind of looked to someone else to see where the problem was. They didn't really know, it seems, what to do. And although the report doesn't single out a particular group, the two areas that really do come up, I mean, the parents are right up there on this. You mentioned, by the way, 2022, he was arrested. Well, he wasn't arrested. He was on a bus with a knife. The police were called because he was reported missing. They found him on the bus and said, what are you going to do with the knife? He said, I intend to use the knife. I intend to also poison people. No arrest was made, therefore no house was searched. If they'd searched the house, they'd have found an armoury of weapons. They'd have found an internet history that was beyond disturbing. That, to me, was a pivotal point.
And the ingredients to make rice,
which he had the details of.
Yes.
Then, of course, as we mentioned as well, the teacher in this case, the head teacher who put her report together on this, couple of points on this. She called him sinister. She was told that he shouldn't be described as sinister. They said that is no way. It was an inappropriate way to describe a child after professional views were submitted to CAMS. The head teacher said she was challenged quite heavily and told no child should ever be described as sinister. She was also told that her attitude towards the risk of him was because she perceived him to be a black boy with a knife. And bang, there we are. That, to me, is the point when this whole thing could have been prevented. She was told, don't say that. We saw it in Nottingham. You just mentioned Nottingham,
yeah.
Peter. Exactly the same assessment was made. We've got well, we can't have too many black guys in here. You know, knife crime, it looks like we're stereotyping. The numbers don't look good.
Yeah, and with
we're working on a flipping database.
Yeah, and with Callacane, OK, not sectioned because of the disproportionate number of black people that are being sectioned.
Yes.
OK, how utterly ludicrous. And of course, you're absolutely right when you quote Sir Adrian Fulford, and he talks about the dilution of the importance of risk and the failure to act. But my word is so simple, grip. If we can get this word into the public services, because some of the other language, OK, you need to read it, sometimes you need to reread it to just get a hold of it. Grip. Grip needs to enter the lexicon of public service language.
Correct.
And supervisors, managers need to be saying to their staff, grip this, deal with it to the nth degree. If need be, prioritise it over other pressures that you might be feeling. And then, and only then, when the managers can then turn round to the government and say, we don't have the funding to deal with everything properly, then they might get the funding they need. But the reason managers force their staff to tick a box, move on, tick a box, move on, is because it looks good for the figures, looks good for them, and they can then upscale it to the management and in turn government and say, look, we're doing a fine job. They're not. They're all failing. Grip, tell the government how it really is and serve the public like you are supposed to do.
Let's have a listen to the chair of the inquiry, Sir Adrian Fulford.
First, the attack on the 29th of July would not have occurred if AR's parents had reported to the authorities the full extent of what they knew in late July, including on the day of the attack. Second, if the relevant agencies, individually and collectively, had properly managed and responded to the known danger that he posed to others from December 2019 onwards, it is highly likely that this event would not have occurred.
And there it is. It would not have occurred had the parents acted, and he mentioned it there, that even on this had happened more than once, but on the day of the attack, they knew he was leaving the house. They knew he had a knife. They found the discarded wrapper of the knife, and they knew he had bad intentions.
Yep.
And they did nothing. I mean, at what point do you not call the police and say, look, my son, he's got all manner of issues, OK, he's going to do something bad, he's threatened it before, he's got the weaponry, he's forever ordering knives, he's got more machetes than a hunting shop. This kid is dangerous. Nothing.
The parents knew this just some days before. That boy had got into a taxi and the father had gone out to the taxi driver and told him not to take him. They were well aware of the intentions of that monster. They knew the risks and they absolutely failed in their role as parents, catastrophically so. And so Elsie, Bibi and Alice rest their precious young souls, and all those other people that were butchered by him and survived and have got lifelong disabilities suffered like they've had to. But this story, of course, will run and run and run. There will be phase 2 of the inquiry. There will be a report, of course, on phase 2. But what is going to happen, inevitably, not only will the families of the deceased young girls sue, but also the injured will sue, both children and adults, and they are going to sue, I'm sure, every single one of these public bodies. School, Prevent, police, social services, they're all going to get sued by everybody who was affected by it. The cost for this that is coming down the line is going to be absolutely vast, and it is, of course, the cost of failure.
Should parents be held criminally responsible is one of the questions here. There are many examples of this in the States, the Colin Gray case, the Crumblies case in Michigan, where parents have received substantial prison sentences because of the crimes. One would assume this is kind of neglect and a lack of guidance, lack of alerting authorities, as we've seen in this case. I want to play you this clip as well. This is Emma Webber. Now, Emma, of course, is the mother of Barnaby Webber, who was one of, as Peter just mentioned, one of the Nottingham attack victims. But this is Emma actually reacting to the Southport inquiry.
I wasn't going to record today because it's been a really, really, really bad day. But I suppose, warts and all, I need to sometimes show what it's really like. And reading some of the outcomes from the Southport inquiry, and to the people who sit in those chairs, giving their evidence, defending themselves, defending their failures with such arrogance and such lack of humanity. Shame on you. And I want to send all my love to the families and the loved ones of those 3 girls at Southport. And to Finbar Sullivan's family, because I do share your devastation. And we have to hope that what we're doing will make change.
The similarities, Peter, between Nottingham and Southport are haunting. And it's kind of an identical pattern. Here we are. It's 2026, for goodness sake. You know, we've seen all this play out so many times where, you know, we go back, I mentioned it to you yesterday, Baby P, it was the same thing. They're pointing over there, no, it was that group, it was, no, the teachers didn't, the doctor should have done, the social services should have done so. You know, there was the whole Sharon Shoesmith issue around that, of course, where, you know, she was questioned about all that was going on around that time. And nobody, as it turned out, took ultimate responsibility. I think phase 2 of this is going to try and get to that.
Victoria Colombier and others, you know, the list goes on. But this is symptomatic of the wider rot and the wider decline in this nation, OK? Let's just, if I may, I'm going to pick the police officers that did not arrest, OK? Their mindset, because their training and their culture says, do not criminalise children. This is borne out a lot from county lines investigations, where it's been discovered that young people have been coerced or bullied or forced into drug dealing on behalf of bigger drug dealers. So there is this reluctance to put them into the criminal system. Well, that may be appropriate sometimes, but you cannot use it as a blanket, because some kids go into drug dealing willingly with their eyes open and they become active core participants. But it goes beyond that. If you're thinking I'm going off message, just bear me out, okay? This don't criminalise children is also, in many regards, linked to directives handed down to magistrates. I was with one last week, and handed down to police officers. Don't arrest people because we haven't got the cell space and there's no room in prison. And the courts are clogged up. And these directives are being handed down. I know it. You won't hear anybody from the judiciary coming forward and saying it. You won't hear police officers telling the truth come forward. It's
coming from the top, right?
But it's happening. They're being told, don't arrest people, don't charge people, don't send people to prison. We've got no space. There's a massive court backlog. And consequently, this mindset filters into the people that are on the front line, because that's what their inspectors and their sergeants tell them to do.
Well, in the case of Rudy Cabana, when they found him on the bus, this is 2022, so 2 years before Southport happened, he was carrying this knife, as we mentioned. He said he intended to use the knife. He also had plans to poison people. He was dealt with as a vulnerable child. That's how they dealt with him. They said, oh, he's vulnerable, he's got autism. Autism is not, and anyone who's got a kid who has autism or anything related will be outraged to think that this is somehow, oh, you got autism, therefore you could be a serial killer, you know, a person with bad intent, etc. This was a nonsense. It was the easy way out. That was a massive turning point, one of many in this story. Peter Blexley is with us. More from Peter in just a moment. Your views on this, and perhaps that question, should parents be held criminally responsible? If you look at the two people who called themselves parents in this particular case, and both gave evidence in this inquiry as well. I think they did this remotely, but they gave evidence. It was a house of absolute chaos, and they knew they had a wrong 'un among them. They knew sinister and terrible things were going on just upstairs in their own son's bedroom. They knew on the day of the attack that something bad was likely to happen. They did nothing. They didn't call anyone. They didn't make a phone call. My lad's just gone out with a machete. None of that. Should they be held criminally responsible? 0344 499 1000. You can drop us a voice note on that number as well. This is Talk.
He's just trying to take credit, Keir Starmer, isn't he?
This man is not a leader. He's not the statesman that our country needs. He's failing us at every single level.
Donald Trump understands that Keir Starmer is fundamentally not a patriot.
Yeah.
He's not on the side of the West. He's been appeasing the Iranians in order to shore up his vote in this country.
In front of me is Waitrose, and I'm about to head in there. I literally openly put the stuff in my bag. I nervously walked to the front door, and away we go.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. Ian Collins in for Jeremy Carr, 6:25. It's Talk Breakfast. Peter Blexley also with us in the studio. We are responding to the big stories of the day. There it is on the front of the Sun today. They didn't have to die. We are talking Southport here. The multiple red flags around this story where they could have seen on so many occasions, whether it was from what was said to the head teacher, whether it was other agencies like Prevent, whether it was the parents themselves, and they really go to the top of the list of those that could have made sure that this was avoided. There's an endless list here. Should parents be held criminally responsible for the actions of their children? Answer me in that respect, if you would. 0344 499 1000. I also, Peter, want to just get a note on what happened after this, of course, because we know there were riots and there were protests, and I would distinguish between those two things. We'll come to that moment in a second. But let's hear firstly from Keir Starmer and his response to what happened after those killings in Southport.
I utterly condemn the far-right thuggery we've seen this weekend. Be in no doubt, those that have participated in this violence will face the full force of the law. The police will be making arrests, individuals will be held on remand, charges will follow, and convictions will follow. I guarantee you will regret taking part in this disorder, whether directly or those whipping up this action online and then running away themselves.
It was a curious story, Peter. I'm not going to defend for 1 second the multiple attacks on police officers that happened. I mean, there was thuggery. I get that, you know, and there were people who were misplaced on what they thought had happened. And, you know, this was a fellow that had come over on a boat and, you know, he'd been here half an hour and he went on a rampage. All of this stuff. So there was a lot of misinformation out there. But I would distinguish between that smaller group of people who were tearing up the place and the genuine anger that was out there. When I hear the Prime Minister talking about his go-to response on this is let's talk about the people that were, you know, being bad in the streets, okay? But what about jailing those responsible for this man being allowed to, the ones we've just been talking about? What about getting convictions for those who didn't do their job, be it in the social services sector, education, the parents, whoever it happens to be? What about the same level of anger from Keir Starmer for where it all went wrong? We didn't hear any of that. We've still not heard any of that. Even when the Home Secretary spoke yesterday, we're not getting that real visceral sense that this is someone's as mad as hell and they're not going to take it anymore.
What do we always look for and never get in these situations? The word is accountability.
Yeah.
They are simply not held to account. Those who manifestly fail in their job, and consequently young children or young adults or Ian Coates, whatever age they may be, these people lose their lives. Yeah. There is no accountability. And that really is part of the greater rot of Britain. It's part of this mindset. It comes back, I'll use the word again, this woke mindset where people tick boxes, move on, do the next thing. People don't grip situations, and then those who have presided all over it or have actually been on the front line and made those gross errors are not held to account. Do we hear about them losing their jobs? Do we hear about them being fined? Do we hear about people being prosecuted for misconduct in public office? No. We do not get any of that. Yeah. And so people, alarm clock Britain, people getting up to work this morning, millions of decent, hard-working, ordinary people just go, what's the point? This country, we don't trust any of it. Yeah. Because this country is going down the tubes. And as we descend into a low-trust country, which is what we are rapidly becoming, we don't trust the systems, we don't trust the public services, we don't trust the government. In low-trust countries, very bad things happen.
Yeah, it's interesting. There is such a crime as misconduct in a public office, of course. Yeah. We have some high-profile cases of that at the moment for other reasons. But it never seems to filter to these kind of stories. I mean, I can't think of anyone who's ever stood in front of a judge or a magistrate to answer for their responsibility in these kind of cases. I mean, when I look back at I know I keep dwelling on this point, but I just can't, I can't get my head around the fact that when the head teacher of the school that Ruda Cabana was at, the one he attended, the head teacher, when she wrote up a report or flagged that she felt, she described having a visceral sense of dread that this kid would do something. and was told that her attitude towards the risk was because she perceived him as a black boy with a knife. She was essentially being called a racist. And now there must be an individual somewhere who told her that.
Yes.
Who's that individual?
Yeah, there will be.
Because that individual's got a big case to answer.
Yeah, there'll be a name at the bottom of a report somewhere.
Yes, someone wrote that. Someone came up with those words and said, you're only thinking this about this kid because he's a black kid with a knife. You're stereotyping, you're being racist. I want to know who said that to the head teacher. Will we get this in phase 2? Because that person should be held responsible. I think that was a pivotal turning point in this inquiry, or in the lead up to this attack, I should say, where it could have been one of many points, Peter, where it could have been avoided.
And the lawyers will find out who that person is if they don't already know. And it may be that lawyers for the victims, for their families, will say, well, we're going to litigate against that person. Yeah. They're going to sue them.
But then you know what will come back? They'll say, well, there wasn't one individual. There was it was a group discussion. And so you'll never be able to get to this one name. It was probably signed on behalf of some agency or...
But civil litigation operates on a balance of probability rather than beyond all reasonable doubt, which you have in a criminal case. So it may be, perhaps, I would welcome it, if there isn't sufficient evidence to prosecute them under misconduct in public office, then if they were to be sued on a balance of probability that they did not do their job as they should have done, and that in turn led to the horrors of that dreadful day, then I'd be delighted to see these people sued for their houses, for their cars, for their pension pots, and left absolutely destitute. I would celebrate that day.
Peter Blexley is with us, 0344 499 1000. Should parents be held criminally responsible for the actions of their kids? That's an interesting question, specifically aimed at this, but also the wider question too. Let's get a voice note on this very point. Morning, Paula.
Morning, Ian. Lovely to hear of a morning. It's Paula in Liverpool. But just what Peter Blexley was saying about do not criminalise children, and that's a directive handed down from magistrates and what have you. Where was that with the rape gangs? Because a lot of those girls were criminalised and were treated like they were the criminals. Just seems a bit two-tier to me, don't you think? Paula in Liverpool.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just gone 6:30. Welcome to Talk Breakfast. Ian Collins in for Jeremy Kyle for the next couple of weeks. Many things to talk about here. It's often tricky on a news day as harrowing as this to cram in the more light-hearted stuff, but we'll look at other stories as well throughout the course of this morning. We are talking about whether, in the wake of phase 1 of the Southport inquiry report, which came out yesterday, it was 800 pages, it throws up a fairly natural question of whether parents should be held criminally responsible for the actions of their children. Let's get a voice note on this point from Jay.
Morning, guys. Fantastic show. Around the time Axel Rudakabana done that horrific thing that he done, I don't even want to talk about it, really. Makes me feel sick as a parent. There was talk at the time, now whether it was just talk or, you know, it was alleged, etc., that the father actually talked him out of doing it a couple of weeks earlier. With a school and school children involved, and you just sit here and you think to yourself, like, if that's the case, if it's the case, 100% the guy should have a prison sentence, without a doubt. There shouldn't even be in question. When are the parents going to start taking responsibility? I mean, we've only got to look at what's happened in Clapham recently of all them kids. When I was younger, if I did that and I went home to my dad, like with the police or whatever, I did go home once with the police, oh my God, trust me, it weren't worth doing again.
You're right. The dad did have that conversation, but the police didn't have that conversation with the dad because the dad didn't take it anywhere else.
Yeah.
And it comes back to parents' criminal responsibility, Peter.
Yeah. The father talked him out of a taxi just a few days before the dreadful Southport incident. But while we're talking about the parents, I'm not going to skirt around the issue. They came here as refugees. They came here and claimed asylum, and they were granted asylum. And that's how they repaid this nation, by raising a monster like that, who went on to slaughter beautiful young girls, injure many more, and injure adults. Do you know what? Boot them out. Kick them out.
And there's a
Deport
lot of certainly online action and thoughts specifically on that. Do you relinquish the refugee status you were granted when it's proven that you are not a worthy citizen? You couldn't even spot a murderer in your own house. Well, you could. You just didn't tell anyone about it. And the house, you know, you see images of the house, it was absolute chaos. I mean, the whole thing was appalling. Even on the day of the attack, as we said a little earlier, they knew their son was going out to do something bad. He took a knife with him. They knew he took a knife with him. The parents really come top of the list of where the Adrian Fulford has aimed his concerns. I think their number. I mean, the agencies.
His
are all
blame,
in
not
there as
concerns,
well.
Ian. His blame.
His blame.
Yeah, his blame.
And rightly so. So
they were.
should parents be held criminally responsible for their actions? The other thing, I'm looking at there it is, the front page of the Sun this morning. They didn't have to die, and I struggle to even talk about this because I've got a son of a similar age to these young girls, and you have to remember there were many other children in that room as well. You had kids trying to protect kids. I can't imagine the level of absolute, knowing the mind of a young 7-year-old, the level of fear that these children, both those who were killed before when they saw this man walk in and go on a rampage, the sheer level of terror that is naturally going to remain with the kids and the adults that were in the room at that time.
So many of them.
It's beyond belief to even try and comprehend. It's unimaginable to even begin to think and process what those people, what those young kids went through on the day, and what those that survive will go on to experience for a long, long time, if not forever.
Yep, and those life-changing, horrendous injuries that so many of them were subjected to as this monster went on the rampage. But bringing it back down to the parents again, okay, they should be deported instantly. But this country has slid so far, and it's so in the grip of human rights lawyers, your likes of Starmer and Hermer and the such like, that you can guarantee that if they were to be deported, they would appeal, claiming that they have a right to family life, even though that child is behind bars. And you can also guarantee that that murdering monster would also claim that he has a right to family life, so that his parents could not be deported. That's the state of this nation.
How bad does it have to get before somebody calls this nonsense out? I mean, what has to happen for someone to sort of start to say, look, hang on, this, these kind of human rights issues, as you say, Parents were granted refugee status. I think that comes implicitly with a certain level of responsibility.
Yes.
We're a civilised nation. You've escaped the genocide in Rwanda. We're here to help you, and we will we'll do that. Your part of the deal is to be good citizens in this country. They weren't good citizens. They were lousy, as it turns out, lethal parents. They are more than culpable for not flagging this up. Multiple opportunities. It wasn't a one-off. That's the bit, I think, Peter. It wasn't a one-off where you could just go, OK, well, they, you know, there was a slight window of 2 minutes and they just missed that window. They would have done. There was none of that. Multiple chances. He had a bedroom full of weaponry. Machetes were being delivered to the house. He's up there online looking up how to make bombs. I mean, this guy wanted carnage, whether he was going to emulate a terror group, whether he was going to emulate school shootings in the States. That seemed to be a particular area he gravitated to. All the signs were there, and the parents did absolutely nothing. I don't know how that can go unchecked and uncharged.
Unpunished. And he had manufactured ricin.
Yeah.
And as Sir Adrian Fulford pointed out very, very clearly yesterday, for the last 2 years before he committed this monstrous attack, he was virtually a recluse in his bedroom. And where were the parents going? What are you doing up here? What did you do? They've broken the deal under which they were allowed to come and stay into the UK.
Yeah.
I'll drive them to the airport and I'll pay for their airline tickets. Get them out of this country. Yeah. They have absolutely no right whatsoever to be here. Look at what their neglect led to.
According to, just to go back to, compound this as well. So on what appears to be a rare occasion where his dad intervened and prevented his son from taking a taxi to his former school, a week before these attacks, which happened on July the 29th, so the week of July the 22nd, his dad had managed a rare moment of intervention and stopped him. So right there is the point when you'd ring the police and say, look, I don't know how you do this, but my son was just heading for his school. He's got an obsession with school shootings. He's got a mass of weapons in his bedroom, and he'd ordered a taxi to go to a school, clearly to carry out some... That would have been the point. But the second, a week later, they knew he'd gone and didn't call the police. That would have been... I mean, if the first time wasn't a red flag to call authorities in, the second time absolutely would have been.
It's very easy how you do it.
He repeated what he was intending to do.
It's very, very easy how you do it, right? And they should have done it the first time when he got in that taxi to go to a school to carry out a murderous attack, because that was his intention. You pick up the phone and you dial 999.
Yeah.
And his parents knew that, and they didn't do it. And, of course, they didn't do it on the date of the fateful attack when they saw the knife packaging. They saw it in the home. They knew he had it. They knew he was in the taxi.
Yeah.
And they didn't do it. Kick him out.
Sir Adrian Fulford did make the point throughout all of this that this monster should have either been in care or in custody.
Yeah.
Anyone could have spotted that. The teacher spotted it. Again, I go back to the head teacher. I keep looking at these horrendous... She described having a visceral sense of dread that he would do something, saying she felt every day it was building and building and building, and her school was left holding the baby as other agencies peeled away when she sought help.
Yep.
She was doing her best. She was the head teacher. She was trying to give it a go. It appears she was either not listened to, told she was overreacting, or in one peculiar, sinister case, told that her attitude was essentially racist.
He was knife carrying on multiple occasions. People knew it. 10 times at school he was found in possession of a knife over the years. It's absolutely astonishing. And, of course, there was this false assumption, as Sir Adrian Fulford called it, among the agencies that somebody else would deal with the risk.
They all thought that.
And
it's not us, it's someone else.
And it comes back to my word, grip.
Grip.
Nobody gripped it and said, we are going to deal with this, and we're going to deal with it to the nth degree until such time as the public are safe. And if I'd been a police officer and I'd nicked him, I would be with him, either sitting in front of him or outside that cell, or making sure that the custody staff were keeping him in that cell. And I would be saying to all my supervising officers, we are not going to let that monster out of here until he is properly dealt with. He's been arrested in possession of a knife, and he's clearly stated that his intention is to harm or murder people.
Do you think the police will now speak out? Do you think there'll be a change at the top? Because it has to kind of come from the top. There's bound to be a beat officer somewhere that is waking up this morning saying, I did try to flag the fact this was a wrong one, and it got me nowhere.
Yeah, and they'll be silenced. They won't be able to come forward and speak. Yeah. They can speak to me off the record. I'll happily
Indeed.
Recycle it back into the public domain, but there will be, there as per usual, and we've had statements yesterday from various senior police officers, the usual mealy-mouthed words that are hollow and don't actually mean anything and won't lead to significant change, and they are more concerned about perception than policing. This is what those senior officers in the corridor of power do when they sit round this morning and they have their meetings, maybe not about Southport, but say it's elsewhere in the country and it's something else, and the opening conversation, the opening line will be, how is this going to look? How do we package this up? What do we say? And let's talk about something very contemporary, that dreadful, appalling rape in Epsom at the weekend, okay, which is very much an ongoing investigation. I'll be responsible as a broadcaster, I always am, but where's the description of the suspects? So that people, members of the public in wonderful Epsom or wheresoever it may be, can help the investigation if need be. No, we get the mealy mouths. Oh, well, it's not a full description yet. Well, give us a partial, that'll help.
Yeah, a partial might be a start. Let's just do some messages coming in. We're asking that question, by the way, should parents be held criminally responsible for their actions of their actions of their children? 03444991000. You can voice note us there as well as call us, or you can message 87222. There's loads of other elements you might want to pick up on this. Christina says, reference Southport, you and Peter are spot on. If they'd done the jobs correctly, those little girls would still be alive today. No one can take responsibility today. Shame on them. This is so sad. Indeed, it is. Mark in Croydon says Peter is correct. Public services tie themselves in knots trying to avoid being labelled racist against ethnic minorities, even if the facts are showing them otherwise. We all know it, but nobody is brave enough to ever say it. Maggie in London, morning, no more lessons to be learned. How I'm sick of hearing that, she says. We need these failed agencies to pay for their failure, not just sacked but held to account. Shame on every single one of them. And Luke says, regarding the failings surrounding the Southport atrocity, I personally believe that the parents, as well as the leadership of the involved authorities, should be held criminally accountable. Ultimately, their acts and or omissions allowed this terrible event to happen. I'll just do one more quickly here from JB in Aberdeen, who says the tick box accountability system introduced by Blair has ruined our public services. It was maybe well intentioned, but it has failed. Peter is quite right. Those charged with responsibilities need to grip the thistle and deal with the problems, not tick box them onto the next managerial desk. Making parents criminally responsible for their children's actions is a must, it seems now. Absolutely bang on from JB. And that point, we can't say this enough, really, that there is an agency, they've got a load of papers on their desk, they've got, you know, the criminal stuff, the concerned social services, the schools, and a system is... The system is almost set up, when you look at it now, to fail. Because to fail the victims, or to fail potential victims, because they do tick all the boxes. They're asked to fill out forms. They fill out a form, they tick the box. Were you concerned? Did you have concerns that it would go on to something lethal? No. So we'll pass that on to the next agency. They'll tick their load of box. They pass it on to them. I mean, it's an anti-intellectual, stupid system, to put it bluntly. It doesn't work. And at the end of it, everyone goes, yeah, we've ticked all the boxes, we've done the reports. OK, who's responsible? Oh, sorry. Do we have to do that bit as well? Yeah, someone should.
It is such a great honour to sit in this chair and listen to those messages and those voice notes coming in this morning. If you took everybody that's messaged in this morning as a collective and made them the government cabinet, imagine how much better this country would be. Everybody has been absolutely spot on about the lack of accountability, about the cowardice of being, because you might be accused of being a racist. All of that, it's absolutely hit the nail on the head. Message after message, voice note after voice note. I couldn't top anything that those contributors have said. They are absolutely accurate, and they want accountability, and they want these people to get a grip, and they want these people to answer for their actions. And of course, what do we all want? We don't want our beautiful young children of this country slaughtered by maniacs. And just as Fulford said yesterday, it should not have happened. And shame on everybody who played a part in either looking the other way, in ticking a box instead of doing their job properly, and in some way, shape or form facilitating it.
And can I just add to that as well, Peter? I would like to see, it's a big ask, this, it's a big ask. I'd like to see some genuine anger from our Prime Minister, maybe our Home Secretary, but ultimately the Prime Minister. I don't want to see him reading for another press release. I don't want to see him standing in the Commons with loads of A4 as he flicks them down and picks up the next one. I want to see him shoot from the hip, get really angry. Everything we've been talking about this morning, the level of anger from our brilliant listeners and contributors here this morning who've been messaging and voice noting in. I want to hear that from the Prime Minister. I want to hear see fire in the pit of his belly. I want to see him almost in tears at the dispatch box. I want to see him promising that I will personally get to the bottom. He was so big on the far-right thuggery. He was massive on the fact that there were people getting angry. I know some of it was misplaced. Nobody is defending throwing rocks at police officers. We all understand that. But the rest of us were concerned. We're concerned about the country we're living in. We're concerned about the actions or the inactions of authority. We're concerned that 3 little girls died that day and many others are irreparable in terms of ever getting through this for the rest of their lives. I want to see that reflected from the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary, some real anger, some real action. But will we see it? No, we won't. This won't happen.
What about him standing up at the dispatch box in the House of Commons and saying, do you know what? All this human rights nonsense has gone a bit too far.
Yeah.
Because that monster's parents should be on a deportation flight now. Do you think you'd ever hear him say that?
You'd never hear him say.
Of course you won't. He is, to the bottom of his boots, a human rights lawyer and fundamentally unsuited and incapable of fulfilling the role effectively of Prime Minister. He has to go.
Let's have a listen to what the Prime Minister said yesterday.
I want to put on record in this House my total determination to make the changes across the entire state that are so clearly necessary to honour the victims, the injured and the families of Southport. Yeah. Today's report, Mr. Speaker, is harrowing. It is difficult to read, and I cannot begin to imagine the pain upon pain that it will cause the families that it affects. And our thoughts are with them today.
Starmer, you're reading it off somebody wrote those words for you. Somebody sat down and went, oh, Prime Minister, here you go, read that. That'll make you look good. It's horrendous. It's a terrible, terrible look. He was more angry about people in the streets who were naturally reacting to what had happened. He was more angry about that. I'm going to make it my life's work to find out. No, you're not. Stop lying to us. This is BS with a capital BS.
Oh, most absolutely. He is the least qualified, the least motivated and the least inspired Prime Minister ever to do what he just said.
Yeah. Because,
of course, he said he's going to change the state. Oh, righto, so you will revoke human rights legislation or the nonsense of it all so that those parents can be booted out. You're going to change things so that social services, education, police are all held individually and collectively accountable, and you're going to create perhaps a new criminal offence of neglect or in public office, etc. No, he won't.
No, he won't. Yeah, I want to see him, so I'm going to winkle out every single individual that was responsible for the levels of ineptitude in who could have stopped this. I want to single out every single one of them. You're going to jail. I want to hear that from the Prime Minister. Let's get a voice note. We're talking about parents' responsibility here. Should parents be held criminally responsible for the actions of their children? Morning, Karen.
Hi, Ian. I agree with Peter 100%. His parents should be deported. They came here escaping so-called genocide from Rwanda, and then their son went on to try and commit another type of genocide, and he killed 3 little girls.
The world is on fire. Russia, Iran, China, conflicts brewing in all of their different regions. They're not waiting. But here in Britain, our armed forces are underfunded, they're undermanned, and they're underprepared. And nobody in government wants to talk about it. Well, we do. I'm Philip Ingram, and I spent my career in the world of intelligence, military planning, strategic planning, and unfortunately, conflict. This is Talk War, and this is where we analyse the conflicts shaping our world.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, good morning. The horrendous errors around Southport. We'll get a final word from Peter Blexley in just a moment. So many areas where failure reigned supreme. It was almost the order of the day. It was almost an aspiration, it seems. Let's get a word on this. A voice note from Carl. Morning, Carl.
Well, it seems to me that the usual racist card has won again. It's the easiest way to shut down debate, to shut anybody up that's putting his head above the parapet. Is the best way to shut anybody up. Play the old racist card, shuts them up straight away. And this is what's ended up. It should be now, they should go back to every person, even if it started from the teacher. They should say to the teacher, who told you to shut up? Go up to him, who told you? And go all the way back, even if it goes into government, to who made the decision.
There are cases, Peter Blexley, where, a horrendous act is carried out by an individual. It's not anybody else's fault but the individual, and correctly we aim our and our condemnation to the individual. This is not such a case. In this case, there are multiple people that could have... We know from the teacher that was told essentially to change your language because she'd marked him out, and they said, well, it's just because it's a black boy with a knife, that's why you're saying this. We know from the parents, we know from Prevent, multiple agencies failed here.
And look at some of those horrendous, ghastly people that have committed absolutely abominable crimes and who, of course, the nation has detested over the years. Harold Shipman, Fred West, Ian Huntley, Peter Sutcliffe, you know, those kind of people.
Yeah.
They fit into that category. And then we have this monster, AR, as the inquiry called him, and of course, Valdo Calacane.
Yeah.
Failure after failure after failure in both cases. And the harsh reality is Alice, Bibi and Elsie, rest their precious tiny souls, should still be with us. Those who were so horrendously injured should not have suffered those. Barney Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar, Ian Coates should still be with us, and those who were injured should not have suffered.
Powerful stuff. Peter Blexley, good to see you, Peter. Thank you. It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. Ian Collins in for Jeremy Kyle for the next couple of weeks. Let's get the news headlines. We're back with more from you after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good morning. Welcome to the home of common sense. You're listening to Ian Collins in for Jeremy Kyle for the next couple of weeks. So much together here. We've been majoring down, of course, on the release of phase 1 of the report into the Southport attacks. It's been published. The chair of the inquiry, Sir Adrian Fulford, released an 800-page report. It makes for utterly disturbing reading. Who is to blame? Multiple elements. Number one, the parents. Should parents be held criminally responsible for the actions of their children? We're asking that question. 0344 499 1000. And the head teacher, who was told to revise her description when she wrote she had concerns. She was told that her attitude towards the risk of this kid was because she perceived him as a black boy with a knife. That's where we're at in 2026. That's how much advancement we've made in 2026. Also this morning, Donald Trump has had a row with the Pope. Who gets the hump with the Pope? I mean, it's a fair question, right? It was during the row with Pope Leo where the American president also released an image depicting himself as Jesus. Now, Mr. Trump later said, no, it wasn't Jesus. It was an image showing me as a doctor. but it wasn't. The clue was the distinct absence of a stethoscope. I'm throwing it out there. Oh, and other doctor-related material. And French police, yet again, accused of doing naff all as several cops in Calais were seen idly looking on as migrants waded into the French Sea, bound for a new shiny life in the UK. Is there any end to the ineptitude of the cops in Calais? Details on that. And a lighter point, shrinkflation is back again. Mars bars have just got smaller. They've reduced the size from 51 grams to 40 grams. That's a significant 11-gram drop. Mars says the move is reflecting new ways that consumers are snacking. We're paying the same for less. That's not a new way. That's a new way of making extra money, not the new way people are snacking. What else have you noticed that has got smaller? We'll throw in a bit of light to the enormous amount of shade that is out there this morning. 0344 499 1000. Deborah says, Ian and Peter, I'm in tears again listening to the Southport report. The saddest part is knowing that no real lessons will be learned from this. We have tens of thousands of individuals on the MI5 watch list walking freely on our streets. That alone says everything about the state of things. And with this government, it's hard to believe anything will change. Well, you hear the giddy levels of ineptitude from Keir Starmer. You heard it in that statement in the Commons yesterday, reflecting on Southport, where he's just reading from a piece of paper what somebody else had written for him. It's not there's no fire in the belly. There's no anger. It's not coming from him. He's not philosophically angered and outraged by the whole thing. He doesn't sound like the bloke that's going to get to the bottom of all of this. Let's get a word on the big stories of the day. David Wooding is with us, columnist with The Sun, of course, political journalist of many years. David, morning to you.
Morning, Ian.
It's classic kind of, I mean, Starmer's not the only one that does this, but we don't, and no one, no country, very few countries ever get a Trump-like character who just fires off, which, has a sort of scattergun approach, which sometimes can work really well. But what we get in this country are these pre-rehearsed, clinically written, clipped, concise press releases, which never mean very much. And, of course, they lack authenticity, they lack passion, they lack reason, really, and, of course, they lack meaning, ultimately.
Yes, and it's down to people like yourselves on talkTV and us working on The Sun to bring it home in the stark words which people understand, and which cuts through the officialdom and brings home the emotion, the truth and the severity of actually what's happened.
And the lessons will be learned line. I mean, you've been reporting, you've worked in news like me all your life. I don't know how many cases. Peter Blexley mentioned Victoria Clumbier. I mentioned Baby P. We could go on with that horrifying list of cases where children have had their lives snuffed out in the most barbaric and disturbing ways. And the line that always comes up is, we will learn from this and move on. I don't know whether anybody ever really does learn, because there's no real systematic change to the system.
Well, when I was writing the leader column in The Sun yesterday, we were waiting for the report to come out, and I said, I bet you the first thing somebody says is, the lessons will be learned. Yeah. And blow me down, Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, with about 3 minutes of the report landing, comes out and says, lessons will be learned. So I did a little exercise and had a look to see how many times this has been used over the past few years. I only had space to get about 2 or 3 of them in the paper because there are so many of them. Yeah. I mean, you go back to the Manchester bombing, you go back to the Nottingham stabbings, which where 3 people were killed, and the one at the park in Reading. And each time somebody said, in authority, the Home Secretary or somebody of that ilk, the lessons will be learned. Well, it's time that the lessons were learned. We're fed up of being told the lessons will be learned. We want the lessons to be learned, and we want action. And it's wearing a little bit thin now. Yeah, if anyone thinks we're making this up, we're not. Let's have a listen to the Home Secretary speaking in the House of Commons yesterday.
The findings of the inquiry are unsparing. Sir Adrian has uncovered systematic failures across multiple public sector organisations. The failure, because it belonged to everyone, belonged to no one. Where individuals missed opportunities to intervene, lessons must be learnt. The perpetrator came into contact with the state on countless occasions. Lancashire Police responded to 5 calls to his home address. The police were called when he was in possession of a knife in a public place. He was referred on several occasions to the multi-agency safeguarding hub. He came into contact with Children's Social Care, the Early Help Service, and Children's Mental Health Services. He was referred to Prevent on 3 occasions. He was convicted of a violent assault and referred to a youth offending team. All failed to identify the risk that the perpetrator posed. The horrific attack was itself evidence of the ease with which it could be concluded.
You might have thought, David, that someone would have, a special advisor would have gone, whatever you do, don't say lessons will be learned.
Absolutely.
You're going to sound ridiculous. But someone didn't get the memo.
They could at least be a little bit of imaginative and find a new way.
Well, you might have thought so. And it's interesting when the Home Secretary talks about, the Prevent and the police and other agencies, as if it's a kind of completely separate world from government. I mean, these agencies function under the current government. They work for the current government.
Yes, and they're all, the phrase dereliction of duty, which was used by Sir Adrian, it couldn't be more apt. I mean, from the parents right down to the agencies, the police, the Prevent organisations, social services, the NHS. I mean, as he said, this wasn't a bolt from the blue. It was an accident waiting to happen. It was 2019 when he was first referred to Prevent. Yeah. He was sent to a school for getting on a bus with a knife. His parents saw machetes and all sorts of horrific weapons. He had a mini armory in his bedroom. Yeah, and they didn't do anything. They didn't do anything at all. And then we find on his internet, he was searching for degloving videos. That's when your skin is ripped off, and beheadings and things like this. The man was clearly had a real problem, and everybody said, "Oh, he's just he's just a bit autistic," or and they were scared of just taking this on. Yeah, and one point we keep coming back to, and we should keep coming back to, because we've seen this play out before, as recently as the Nottingham killings, where there was a sensitivity around race. The head teacher of the school, for those who didn't hear, I'm sorry to repeat this again, but it's worth really hammering this one every moment we can. The head teacher, who'd said she had a visceral sense of dread of this kid, that he would do something, said every day felt like it was building and building, and that her school was left holding the baby as other agencies peeled away. She called him sinister. She was told she had to cross that word out and told that you need to use the word appropriate, because kids shouldn't be described as sinister. So that was the first point. But she was later told that her concerns, her attitude towards him being a risk, was because she perceived him as a black boy with a knife. Essentially, she was being accused of being a racist. Now, I don't even know where to start on this. I mean, it's horrifying that there is an individual sitting somewhere, David, in an office that told her that. Yes, and the problem is you have these woke organisations which put the rights and the protection of dangerous people before public safety. And it's about time that the balance was tilted in favour of the man, woman and child in the street. We are at risk because of these dangerous people who are being managed badly. When somebody is walking around with knives, collecting them in their bedroom, referred to Prevent, somebody has to do something. They can't say, "Oh, but he's." You see, autism should have been a warning sign. The fact that he was autistic and was collecting these knives and searching for violence on the internet. It shouldn't have been an excuse. It should be a danger sign. It really should have been. And we've been talking about the lack of, any real kind of anger from our politicians. It's worth just replaying this after there was rioting, of course, after this happened. And I'll say the same thing again. No one is defending those that did bad stuff, throwing bricks at police officers and tearing the place up. I would distinguish that group from those that had
genuine concerns, whether it was about immigration, whether it was about just the horror of what had happened. But Keir Starmer saved his anger for this group, it seems. We didn't
I utterly
hear much...
condemn the far-right thuggery we've seen this weekend. Be in no doubt, those that have participated in this violence will face the full force of the law. The police will be making arrests, individuals will be held on remand, charges will follow, and convictions will follow. I guarantee you will regret taking part in this disorder, whether directly or those whipping up this action online and then running away themselves.
You see, I'd like to hear him say something like that, David, about the various agencies that didn't do their job, that they will feel the full force of the law. We will seek you out, we will find you, and where possible, we will prosecute you. But I'm not holding my breath on this.
Well, there you go. You've just hit the nail on the head, Ian. As I was saying before, how the agencies seem to put the protection of a dangerous young man before the protection of the general public. Here we have the Prime Minister saying that, or coming down like a ton of bricks, acting swiftly against people who have posted things on social media, whereas nothing is done about this ticking time bomb that has been in our midst for 5 years.
Let's move to this story. Donald Trump. He's had a row with the Pope. Who has a row with the flipping Pope, for goodness sake? I mean, you can't have a row with the Pope, surely. Isn't it illegal to have a row with the Pope? Don't you get struck down with a thunderbolt if you have a row with the Pope? He managed to have a row with Pope Leo, who's a fellow American, it should be. I love the fact we have a Pope that actually speaks like, you know, a kind of fellow that might have walked out of a Sopranos episode or something. I'm slightly over-egging it, but you take the point. The Pope didn't want to really get involved in a row with Donald Trump, and during that row, Mr. Trump posted an image of himself. It was a kind of, somebody had mocked up an image of Donald Trump as Jesus, really. And he posted it, and there he is with a sort of the light of life in his hand, putting his hand on the head of the dying. He did then delete it, but he was challenged about this by reporters and said, you know, Mr. President, well, you can muck around, but having a row with the Pope and then you're depicting yourself as Jesus, for goodness sake. Donald Trump was having none of it. Have a listen to this.
Well, it wasn't depiction. It was me. I did post it, and I thought it was me as a doctor, and it had to do with Red Cross as a Red Cross worker there, which we support. And only the fake news could come up with that one. So I just heard about it, and I said, how did they come up with that? It's supposed to be me as a doctor making people better, and I do make people better. I make people a lot better.
I think the question is, how did he come up with that, David? I mean, it's clearly not a picture of a doctor in any shape or form. I've seen George Clooney on that programme. He doesn't look like that. In fact, if a doctor came to your bed dressed like that, you'd think that was the end of your days, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. Look at the uniform, the red cloak and the orb of light coming from his left hand and the beams coming off his right hand as he touches him on the head. I mean, what is he going to do next? Is he going to turn water into Coca-Cola and perhaps the miracle of
Diet Coca-Cola? It should be said. David.
Yes. Okay. And five burger buns and 2 fillet of fishes. Maybe he's going to do that next. Honestly, he would. It shows he would pick a fight in an empty room. To have a fight with the Pope, particularly when there's 60 million Roman Catholics in the United States, 20% of the population. And I know, and you know, and anybody who's travelled to the Bible Belt of the USA, most of whom voted for Donald Trump, they really take their religion seriously, and they will not like this.
No, they won't like it. Quick word, if you would, David, as well, on the French police. It's yet another example of the old Bill over there in Calais, just sort of standing around as a load of people. We haven't got the numbers for yesterday's crossing. There are some suggestions it could be around about 200. These numbers just kind of, they're water off a duck's back now. We don't even think about it. They're so big on a regular basis, and as the weather gets better, of course, the numbers increase. And so there they were. The police meant to be stopping these people jumping on boats, but stood by. It was a day at the beach, essentially, for the Calais police.
Yeah, they're all standing there puffing on their galloirs as these people get on the boat and put their lives at peril. Just 4 days after 4 people died on one of these flimsy boats. We've had 370 coming in the past week. And that sort of overshadows the number of people we've even deported under the one in, one out deal.
Yep.
It's just a farce. And the only way to stop this, Ian, is to have some kind of deterrent. And they're even talking about similar deals to Rwanda now, but they don't mention the R word, I'm afraid.
No, don't mention the R word. No. On a light one to finish with, David, Mars bars are getting smaller. I mean, I thought Mars bars had already got a whole lot smaller, but they're going down from 51 grams, the 51 gram version, costing 75p. They're going down from 51 grams to 40 grams. The price is, that's quite a significant 11 grams difference. They're making them smaller. And, of course, they're not the only thing that has gone to... We remember when curly whirlies were a metre long. Remember that? And were massive. A wagon wheel was literally a wheel. All this stuff has, like, gone gradually. Mars bars, you know the little fun-size Mars bars you can buy?
The only ones we can
that will soon be the Mars bar.
They're the only ones we can afford now, the fun size.
Exactly, yeah. We've gone fun size.
Shrinkflation seems to be the new inflation, doesn't it? I mean, they don't put prices up anymore. They just cut back. Soon we'll be getting empty packets, I would guess.
That's right. You just buy the packet for memorabilia purposes. Mars Wrigley, who own it, said the move reflected new ways consumers are snacking. Get in the bin. What a lot of old nonsense. New ways. You're paying the same money for less. When did that ever become a thing in the business model?
Staggering. But of course, it's good for our health, Ian. I mean, the fact that we spend more and eat less means we have to work harder. We don't eat as much. We lose a bit of weight. We'll all be healthier in the end. So let's pay a lot more money over to Mars and get less off them.
Absolutely right. Yeah, still like a Mars. The Mars bar was always a dad's chocolate, wasn't it? I remember, we used to buy one for my dad for Christmas. Like, you could have a Mars bar. He must have been delighted.
I could never finish one. They're too big, and
not anymore.
You eat a Mars bar, you can't eat anything else for the rest of the day.
Yeah, indeed. Good work, David. Thank you very much indeed. 0344 499 1000. Lots to come. We're going to be speaking to Lord Carlisle in just a moment on that issue of counter-terrorism and the prevent strategy that went horribly wrong. We're also asking that question this morning: should parents be criminally responsible for their actions? Let's get a voice note on lessons being learned. This comes from Jane. Morning, Jane.
I am sick of hearing these words. Nothing could be done. It won't happen again. It does happen again. We'll live through it year after year, month after month, and there is something we can do. Deport them.
Some breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
Something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a talk exclusive. We've been looking at
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, does these people who lead us actually hate Britain?
Yeah.
Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 25 minutes past 7. We'll come to some of the lighter stuff in a few moments' time. Let's get a word on the Southport Part 1 of the release of the report. This is phase 1. It is very damning of multiple areas and agencies. Lord Carlisle of Berriew is with us. I pronounced that correctly, Alex. Good morning to you.
Absolutely. Good morning. You got it right.
Nice to have you with us. Prevent. I know you've been very defensive of Prevent. They are mentioned multiple times in this report. I'm not talking about in this particular occasion.
I've never been defensive about Prevent. I've been very direct about Prevent, and I have recommended repeatedly that changes should be made to Prevent.
Okay. Were any of those changes that you've recommended? I mean, you certainly have reviewed Prevent. You know all about Prevent. Is anything that you've said should happen, has it happened?
An awful lot has happened since I first reviewed Prevent in 2011. But the terrorism threat has changed in its character as well. Prevent has not always kept up with that. Sir Adrian Fulford produced an excellent report, very direct, very straightforward. Everything he has said should be followed. And I'm delighted that the Prime Minister responded almost immediately to the report, saying, obviously, they're going to follow the recommendations made.
It didn't respond with any particular anger or annoyance at what had happened, did he? I know he's the Prime Minister. He's not meant to start.
He's the Prime Minister.
Jumping up and down.
He responded very positively and effectively.
Well, he didn't, did he? I mean, he really didn't.
Well,
he read out of a press release that somebody had written for him saying, you know, lessons will be learned. We hear it every time.
Well, if he didn't say lessons would be learned, you'd be saying, why didn't he say lessons would be learned?
Because everybody says lessons will be learned, and Prevent have come under the microscope on more than one occasion for this very or versions of that same mantra. It doesn't come under our category. It's not something we could deal with. We thought everything was okay. I mean, Prevent, 3 times missed the boat on this one.
And that is very disappointing indeed. But there are some background reasons for that. As Lord Anderson, a very distinguished colleague of mine, said yesterday, the way in which people commit terrorism acts has changed. When I started as independent reviewer of terrorism legislation in the early 2000s, we were dealing with very known, very organised actors and organisations. Now we have people like the Southport perpetrator who become radicalised at home and do not fall into any very well-defined religious or political belief. Prevent has to adjust so that it takes those people into account. And, you know, if you look across the piece, there are many, many cases, many highlighted by an excellent organisation called 100 Families, in which very seriously mentally ill people go out and kill or damage other people and cause great danger to society. And we must ensure that we learn the lessons from the Fulford report, which is one of the best pieces of work that's ever been done in this area.
Prevent was never said, as far as I know, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I mean, yes, of course, the way, lone attackers and those that are not linked to a specific ideology is relatively new, but I mean, we have to be careful how we use the word relatively. It didn't start last week, did it? We've known for some time that terrorism can come in many forms, and this is one of them. How could Prevent be so behind the curve on this?
Well, it's partly an issue about the organisation of Prevent. My own view is that Prevent should be organised on a much more national basis so that the same standards apply all over the country. Also, the way in which referrals to Prevent are dealt with should be standardised so that when a Prevent committee, a panel, meets to decide whether someone should be admitted into Prevent programmes, everyone who's making that decision should see all the material, which doesn't happen at the moment. And that, of course, is absurd. And I think that the changes that are needed are simple, but crucially important. Another very important point I'd like to make is about the sharing of information. For years and years and years, it's been difficult to persuade mental health services, housing, education, and parents to share information so that we can know whether somebody represents a danger to the public. That obviously has to stop. We now have to have a joined-up system.
But that is the same.
So
You know, we can go back. I know this isn't terrorism in the conventional sense, but you can go back to Baby P, Victoria Clumbier, these kind of cases where, you know, people said the same thing. You know, that agency wasn't talking to that agency. The school didn't talk to social services. Social services didn't talk to clinicians. I mean, how much longer, Alex, does this have to go on for?
Well,
kids are dying.
You're making an excellent point, and I did a report when, as long ago as when Michael Gove was Secretary of State for Education, what was called the Edlington case, and made the point that these organisations all have to talk to one another. That has not yet happened, and it's time for that reluctance to share information to stop, and that's why the way in which you're dealing with this is so valuable, I think.
Is it? I mean, we appear to be in sort of a, I know this is a cliche, a bit of a box-ticking world where one agency fills out a form, or you've got to get a D182 form for that, or whatever it's called. I'll fill it out, I pass it on to my senior, they fill out the next bit, then they stick it in a file and it stays there. Another agency is doing their box-ticking, and everybody sat around and had meetings in the case of Southport, but nobody wanted to take responsibility for it. So there was no...
It may be
no
perversely,
point of gravity there.
It may perversely be because they do not fill in enough forms in cases like this. Because if you had asked each of the people who came into contact with the perpetrator, from the parents to the police, via the medical services and so on, has this person ever done something that is potentially dangerous to the public? If that question had been asked, every one of them, if they were telling the truth, would have had to tick yes. But they didn't share that information. So we need a better system in which there is linkage between them, whether they do it by forms or face-to-face. Because by and large, Prevent does exactly what it says on the tin. It prevents people successfully from becoming terrorists. But there are holes in the sieve.
Well, it didn't prevent this guy, did it?
No, there are holes in the sieve, and we need to deal with
So it doesn't work?
It does work in a very large number of cases. Unfortunately, there have been a few cases in which it failed to work very badly. That's the issue that Fulford is dealing with.
I get that, but do we have to accept that Prevent just can't prevent all attacks, even if someone is on the radar 3 times? Not once, 3 times.
Well, the answer to your question
That's
is,
failure,
of course we
right?
don't have to...
That's failure.
Of course it's...
Prevent
Of
failed.
course it is. Of course it did in this instance, but you have to remember that these are very complex systems. You know, the police arrest innocent people quite often, but that doesn't mean we stop the police having the power of arrest, and they release people who are very guilty, but that doesn't mean we abolish the police. Prevent is in exactly that same very complex field, but we have to get it right for the future. And Sir Adrian Fulford has made very clear the sorts of things that should be done. And I and my predecessors as independent reviewers of terrorism legislation support very much his report and the government's reaction to it.
Lord Alex Carlisle, thank you, sir. Great to have you with us. Lord Alex Carlisle of Berriew is former 2011 Prevent Strategy Reviewer. I think he's rather a nice bloke and all the rest of it. I'm sure, you know, the grandkids love him. I get that, but that's not what we're here to establish. We're here to establish why the system is broken. And I think he reflected and almost endorsed one of the Prime Minister has given a good answer. No, he hasn't. The Prime Minister has given a really bad answer to this, an answer that lacks any real meaning or passion or determination. It's not in the cut of his jib to go there as a Prime Minister. He doesn't function in that way. He's another pen-pushing lawyer. He's another clinical press release ponderer. He likes to read out words written for him on bits of paper. But he's not angry. And Lord Carlisle, I appreciate he's not in this in that sense. He's a commentator on these issues. Where's the anger? And that's the problem. Paul's in Brighton. Paul, good morning to you.
Yeah, good morning, Ian.
Hi.
A couple of points, Ian. It's a shame Peter Bexley's not on earlier, because he might recall this incident. But many, many, many years ago, in the days of Blair, I believe that's when all this wokery and going soft on prisoners or suspects started. There was a case where someone of an ethnic minority, inverted commas, was arrested. He was put in the back of a police car, no handcuffs, no restraints, and he had a concealed weapon. And he stabbed the police officer to death, or the protection officer, whoever he was. And Peter might remember this case. And the Blair creature, as Peter Hitchens likes to call him, had the audacity to go to this guy's funeral, this police officer's funeral, because he knew him from the protection officer's days. But this going soft on the potential criminals, I reckon, started then.
Peter Bexley could probably talk for several hours on this very point, Paul, and he would back up everything you've just said. He said to me just before he left the studio, he said, when he looks back at how policing used to be, he said, it's been a deliberate attempt by seniors, not by the average copper that joins the job because they want to make a difference and solve crime. We all know that, but from seniors, and whether that's politicians or top cops, who've gradually diluted the entire purpose and meaning of the police force. It's a social services, essentially, and that's not an accident. It didn't happen organically, just, oh, look, when we weren't looking, we've changed into this. It was deliberate, and that's why we have cases such as the one you've just highlighted. That's why we have cases such as Southport. That's why we have issues around all manner of areas concerning race. Nottingham and Southport have two very distinct. There's many similarities, sadly. They're all grim and horrific. But the issue of not mentioning someone's race or not mentioning someone's crimes because people might think you're being racist.
Exactly. The other point, Ian, you mentioned about the lack of backbone in Starmer.
Yeah.
I don't know if you recall, another poignant moment was when he was almost like he was press ganged into going to lay a wreath, and the BBC just caught a glimpse of him just before he walked down to the spot where he had to lay the wreath.
Yeah,
and he was given the flowers by some flunky, and it was almost like the look on his face was he was going to receive root canal treatment. He didn't want to be there. I've got to do this just for the cameras. But that look on his face just said it all. I don't want to be here.
They didn't really know. I've said this constantly, Paul. He's not very good at being the Prime Minister. And, regardless of his party, he's just not very good, doesn't know how to react in situations. He's clunky, bit awkward. And it was reflected in the most harrowing way, exactly as you've just mentioned, Paul, in that wreath laying in Southport. Paul, I've got to move for time, but thank you for that. Paul in Brighton, 0344 499 1000. We'll come to some lighter stuff as well in a moment. We are taking your calls. Should parents be held criminally responsible for their actions? And related to Southport, let's get a voice note. This from Judith.
Good morning, it's Judy from Altops, West Yorkshire. All this talk about deporting the parents of that terrorist that murdered them little girls. It'll never happen, never happen. We don't deport rapists, murder. We don't deport anybody, actually. If Adolf Hitler had come over on a boat, we'd have allowed him to stay. I think what they need to do, though, is prosecute them for allowing him to get away with doing this, doing what he was doing. I mean, he was ordering stuff off Amazon. You don't, unless he's got his own credit card, they know everything, what he was getting. And they know he'd tried to go to school to stab people. So why didn't they just ask for some help?
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. 2020, it's Ian Collins in for Jeremy Carl for the next couple of weeks. This is the home of common sense. The news is grim out there today. I'm making no apology for covering and reflecting what has been happening, whether we are talking about Southport, whether we're talking about immigration. There's a whole list of things. Very few places will talk. The Houses of Parliament, interesting. The place you'd think they would talk incessantly and very passionately about this stuff simply doesn't go there. It doesn't go there. Our prime ministers, our leaders, our secretaries of state, they don't go there. They don't do passion and annoyance. They don't do anger. They simply like to read from their pieces of paper that somebody else has written for them, and we're reflecting on that as well. 0344 499 1000. And here's another story that should shame members of the government. Farmers threatening to block Britain's roads unless Rachel Reeves brings down fuel costs. Farmers for Action, a campaign group, has warned ministers of protests unless the Chancellor cuts tax on red diesel used for tractors. This is not cheap. Similar protests in Ireland crippled the country last week, forcing Dublin to send in the army. William Taylor, Farmers for Action coordinator, said his organisation has been asked to consider UK-wide tax and fuel protests. Sean McCauley is from Farmers for Action Steering Committee. Sean, good morning to you.
Good morning, Ian. How are you?
I'm very good, sir. Nice to have you with us. Just give us an overview, if you could, of what it costs red diesel, because this doesn't come cheap and it's getting more expensive by the hour.
Yes, red diesel is the fuel that farmers use, and obviously we're moving into the spring now. We have crops to go in. We have grass to grow for livestock. Red diesel is needed to run the tractors and the machinery. On top of that, we also this is the time of year when the largest amount of fertilizer is put on the ground, both to crops and to grass. That also has doubled in price and is continuing to rise in line with fuel. Yeah. Just, Ian, to make the point, I just saw figures this morning there from Anderson's that are saying that agflation, which is agri input inflation, is now running at 7.6%. And when we take the general inflation at 3%, but on top of that, we also see that farm output prices have fallen 6.5% year on year. So farm gate prices are dropping, but input costs are soaring through the roof. And so farmers, and I think other industries out there, especially haulage, find themselves now in a non-workable position. Our backs are against the wall. So we have written to key figures within the Labour government asking for a meeting so as we can sit down and discuss this. That's why we have said in our press release we're waiting to see their response. And that's where the position stands at the minute, Ian.
And this is not beyond the capability of the Chancellor, of course, to address this. In fact, it's quite easy. A sixth former could work this one out. The cost of fuel is going up. The VAT doesn't have to go up with it. It's only going up because the government have made it go up with it. They could scrap that element to begin with.
Yes, of course. And as the fuel goes up, the more money comes into the government.
Of course.
And food security, as we rightly always say, Ian, now should be top of the agenda, especially when we look at the position we find ourselves in the world.
You think so?
And if we rely on imported food coming in, and we see what's happening now, where are we going to be? So the Chancellor, there is an onus on the Chancellor here to, as you rightly say, look at the VAT position. Yeah. I know in Southern Ireland, they were looking at the VAT position. They were also looking at carbon tax. Yep. And these taxes that governments are now putting on.
Well, it must be the figure. Yeah, sure. I was just going to say, Sean, on the back of that, I mean, standard diesel in a petrol station has gone up sort of over 50p a litre since this whole thing in Iran happened. I'd love to see the number of what additional income the government have made in just the last month. It must be vast. Factor in red diesel on top of that, the thing that keeps you guys running. It's literally the lifeblood of your plant and your machinery. I mean, it's off the scale, the additional numbers. That could be addressed in the swipe of a pen.
Yes, that's you're quite correct, Ian. So, you know, that's where we're saying we have written to them, we're requesting a meeting, and we're waiting. We're waiting to see what their response is. And if they don't respond, people have no other option, Ian, but to take this further.
What is the deadline on this then, Sean? Are you giving the Treasury a certain amount of time to act, and if they don't, then you will act and protest? What's the deal there?
Well, as I say, you know, we said over the coming days we'll watch this, Ian. We haven't set a date as yet, but we're in constant consultation with our colleagues in the UK, right across the UK, every day at the moment. So we're, as I say, we're watching the position, and when we feel the time, if the government don't respond positively, and we feel the time is right, then action's going to have to be taken.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's the most farmer-friendly government we've seen in the UK.
Oh, most certainly not, Ian. I think we only have to look at the inheritance tax, and I know you covered that, along with my colleague William Taylor, and that's still a difficulty for farmers. The inheritance tax. Now we have all the other tax on top of us, and I think people, you know, right across the board, and working people right across the board, have never felt this tax thing as much. They've been taxed right, left, and centre at every turn round, Ian.
Yep. Spot on. Sean, good luck with everything. We'll keep in touch as well. Thank you, Sean McCauley. He's from the steering committee of Farmers for Action. No one wants to see protests on the streets. No one wants to encourage protests on the streets, but you can feel the visceral sense of helplessness from areas like farming. And, of course, it's coupled against the backdrop of this government whose understanding of business is pretty much zero. Imagine having a government where no one in it has ever worked in business. That's why you've got crazy rules around landlords and rentals. That's why you've got taxes being increased on small business owners. That's why you've got farmers being kicked right, left and centre, as Sean said. Because to the likes of the Angela Rayners and the Rachel Reeves of this world, these are all rich old duffers, every single one of them. Landlords, shopkeepers, farmers, you're all rich. You're probably Tory voters, if not Reform voters. You got loads of money. So what do you do? They talked about, was it Starmer said, my first port of call is to grow the economy. He wouldn't know how to grow the economy if it jumped out of a cab with a name badge on it. I mean, he's got literally no clue in these kind of areas. It's not in the DNA of this government. Couple of lighter ones just to throw in here. We mentioned shrinkflation, that Mars bars are getting smaller. The 51-gram Mars bar is about to become 40 grams. I think 11 grams is quite significant. I don't know what percentage that is, but it's like, what was it? It was 50 grams. It's now going to be 41. So it's 10%, over 10%. Smaller than it was before. And we often joke about the fact that, you know, curly whirlies used to be the length of a metre ruler. Do you remember that big metre ruler the teacher had at school? What a wonderful bit of kit that was. Amazing bit of kit, coupled only with that thing that you could measure. Remember that? It was a wheel on a stick and you could measure length with it. It clicked yards. You took it round the playground to measure it. That was also a bit tasty. And that's what a curly whirly used to look like. It was that long. You carried it like a ladder when you bought one of those things in the tuck shop. They had to open a window when the tuck shop was selling them so they could get them in. They were massive. The curly whirly was huge. And that's kind of shrunk to something unrecognisable. I mentioned wagon wheels, and probably every item of confectionery you can think of has got some. Crisps are strange. My little boy asked me for a packet of crisps the other day, and I thought, I know what I'm going to do. I won't give him a full packet because it's a bit late in the day. And I said, I'll tell you what, why don't I put some in a bowl for you? So I picked out a little plastic bowl from the drawer. I took a handful of crisps, put them in the bowl. I thought, does that look about right? It's not very many. And I went to put my hand back in the bag. There was nothing left in there. You get about like 15 crisps in a bag of crisps. I remember when crisps used to look like, you know those big sacks of potatoes that chippies have? That's what a bag of crisps used to look like. You could hardly carry the thing. You got curly whirly on one shoulder, bag of crisps on another shoulder. This was like you were entering some kind of contest. Except you needed a wheelbarrow. You got a free wheelbarrow with those things too. So shrinkflation. Anyway, on that point, Maria says, I remember our mum used to cut Mars bars into slices and it was shared around the family. They were massive. We used to do that at Christmas. It was a big thing, like Christmas Eve, cutting the chocolate up. I got to about 13 and I thought, this is a bit weird. But as a kid, it was amazing. And Keith says, Keith in Wolverhampton, Mars have reduced the size of their bars. It reflects the state of the UK. They've removed the bit that helps you work. Yeah, that used to be the slogan, didn't it? A Mars a day helps you work, rest and play. I think they probably removed that because legally it looks like they're advocating something that's healthy. And I don't mind a Mars bar. I had one a couple of days ago. I don't know whether they'd come under the umbrella of healthy. They don't part you 5 a day, right? Tasty, maybe. Healthy, not sure. 0344 499 1000. Your thoughts on shrinkflation. It's not just the food stuff either. It's other things you can buy. You go in those pound shops, by the way, and some of those pound shops sell a special version of. So you think, oh, the washing powder, the Ariel that you get in Tesco or Sainsbury's. They sell it in the pound shop for, well, £1 or whatever. Because not everything in the pound shop's £1. That's a whole separate conversation. But actually, they're often packaged in smaller boxes, so you get less for your money. So it's the whole thing. We're being conned all over the place. We're not getting enough or as much bang for our buck. Your thoughts on that? Message 87222, or you can voice note us on 0344 499 1000. We're back with more from you coming next on Talk.
Is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royalty from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the royalty from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk. Good morning. Just gone 10 to 8. It's Ian Collins in for Jeremy Carl for the next couple of weeks. Let's talk a little bit about Britain's security. The UK's security is in peril, I'm quoting, and the country's leaders have shown a corrosive complacency towards a key government advisor has warned. This is Lord George Robinson. He's former NATO General Secretary, wrote to the government's Strategic Defence Review, has accused non-military experts in the Treasury of vandalism in a speech to be delivered today. Let's get a word on this from Professor Gwythian Prince, former advisor to the MOD, NATO and the United Nations. Good morning to you, Professor. Nice to have you with us, sir.
Good morning.
This is disturbing stuff, quite clearly, on a number of levels. George Robertson, former, many of us remember him, of course, as a former Labour Cabinet Secretary. He was elevated to the giddy heights of NATO General Secretary. This is a stark warning.
If Mr. Starmer can't pay attention to George Robertson, who is a very serious grown-up individual, I have had the honour of working with George in the past, then he's not going to listen to anyone, but then he isn't going to listen to anyone on this. We are in a position today where we are in the middle of a functional world war. Now, as I said when I was last on your show with your colleague, there is a famous saying attributed to Trotsky that you may not be interested in war, but war is very interested in you. And war is very interested in this country, and we are now functionally defenseless. That's what George is saying.
Yeah.
But he's saying something much more important. Let's put some figures on it. If you add together the doubling of the amount of money that's been shoved into the nationalized health service, by the way, with zero effect on improving outcomes in health, plus what I would describe as hyper welfare spending, which is completely out of control. And that together exceeds the tax take. Don't talk about GDP, doesn't mean anything. How much money is actually going into the piggy bank?
Yep.
Right. We are spending, they are spending more than comes in. So what do? You have to borrow to make the difference, right? The cost of the borrowing is 101 billion, which is 30 billion more than the defense budget. If you added together the National Health Service costs, plus the hyper welfare, plus the interest rates, it's 7 times the defense budget. And Starmer has made it clear that he has not got the backbone to face down his majority.
Well, indeed. There was the backbench revolt when they even mentioned touching welfare. It was almost a sacred cow that cannot be touched. It was an extraordinary. They weren't even talking about reducing the spending, just the increase in the debt. But it still didn't wash.
Let's, if we may, we don't have much time. Let's just cut to the chase. What Mr. Starmer has managed to do, quite incredibly, in 18 months, is to make this country essentially irrelevant. He goes traipsing around the Middle East, pathetically trying to find somebody who he can talk to. Nobody is in the remotest interested in what he has to say because we have nothing to offer.
Correct.
He's made an absolutely massive mistake at the beginning of this second phase of the war to get rid of the most evil regime that we in the free world have faced since Hitler, that is to say the Shia theocracy in Iran, by refusing on entirely specious grounds of so-called international law, which, by the way, isn't law at all. It isn't law in any definable way. It's a posture. But he's used this to say to the Americans, no, you can't use Diego Garcia, no, you can't use Fairford. And then, of course, as he seems to do with everything, he does a U-turn, but it was too late.
Yeah.
So, Trump may speak rather bluntly, but he's not wrong.
Indeed, it's a point I would also echo and have made myself many times in this respect. I think one of the most damning things that Lord George Robinson is saying, but absolutely bang on, is he's accusing non-military experts in the Treasury of vandalism in this speech. And it's exactly that, isn't it? People who haven't got a clue what they're talking about. They're looking at a spreadsheet, they're looking at an abacus, and they're going, oh, we've got this amount of money. They're not thinking about the wider, they're not linked in any theoretically linked, philosophically linked to the story. They're just looking at a few numbers in a column.
Well, it's true, but it's worse. Just flashing onto the screen as you were saying those words was a picture of Jonathan Powell, who is currently the National Security Advisor.
Yeah.
Now, Jonathan Powell is the classic representative, along with Peter Mandelson and Campbell, not only of the trio who brought New Labour to power, but also of what I, using a phrase that my dear late friend Roger Scruton first coined, to describe as the down with us group. Yes. These people have a philosophy that everything that this country does, stands for, represents, its past, its present, everything we can possibly offer is wrong.
Yeah.
And that every foreigner is right.
There is a kind of self-flagellating underpinning of these guys. I've got to step in there, Gwithian, for no other reason than time, sir. But let's speak again in the next couple of weeks, because this could generate many more issues around this subject of government ineptitude and spending and the like. He's Professor Gwithian Prins with us on the programme. Let's get the news headlines now. The time is 8 o'clock.
This journey of me following the migrants went from sort of 10 in the morning all around the clock to late at night, to the point where, you know, on buses, on trains, through streets, at every key point, French military police and the French police, they were there. They were on the bus, taking down notes, taking pictures, but not doing anything to deter the migrants or stop them, just being there. I was sat in the tent and he was showing me through photos of his phone, scrolling through. This was barbaric, horrific stuff. Blokes going through walls in vehicles and then jumping out and shooting everyone. You know, his WhatsApp picture was him with a mask on, with a gun like that.
You're in a tent with this guy?
I'm in a tent with this guy, and actually he was just showing me this stuff. I'm just thinking, this is not the kind of bloke you want to be coming to the UK.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good morning. Yes, welcome back. It's the home of Common Sense. Ian Collins sitting in for Jeremy Kyle for the next couple of weeks right here on Breakfast. There's so much to get into. The news is, I forewarn you on this, the news is rather grim for obvious and apparent reasons. Phase 1 of that report into the Southport attack has been published. It's 800 pages of very disturbing conclusions from Sir Adrian Fulford. It looks into all sorts of elements and ineptitude, namely the parents, many authorities and agencies, and of course accusations, potential accusations of racism as to why something... There it is on the front page of The Sun this morning. I'll show you that now. They didn't have to die. And there is the pictures of those 3 little girls whose lives were lost on that fateful day back in July 2024. It really didn't have to happen. The enormous amount of possibilities and opportunities to spot what was wrong, namely the parents. I think the judge in the inquiry, Sir Adrian Fulford, reserves most of that conclusion for the parents, but he does bring in all sorts of other elements. Phase 2 will go deeper into this, but certainly the parental aspect, teachers afraid to say things for fear of being accused as a racist. They've got a knife-wielding animal in their school, and they can't say that because, well, you can't say that about a black kid with a knife. The head teacher was literally told that. There's no hyperbole. I'm not making this up. That happened. We'll continue to look at that story as well. Donald Trump, his row with the Pope. Who has a row with the Pope? Donald Trump. He depicted himself as Jesus for about half an hour before he took the post down. But it wasn't long before the vultures circled and said, "Are you sure you're Jesus?" He said, "No, it wasn't meant to be a picture of me as Jesus. It was meant to be me as a picture of a doctor." What's that, a doctor dressed as Jesus? Maybe it is. French police again accused of doing naffle of several cops in Calais show no sign of anything, frankly. They just it's really a day at the beach. I think when you're at the police station in Calais, they go, "What are the duties this morning?" Jean-Pierre, you're off to the beach. Fantastic. I bet if you look down there, a bucket and spade with them. They weren't stopping any immigrants jumping on boats, that's for sure. And on a lighter note, shrinkflation is back. Mars bars have just got a whole lot smaller. They've reduced the size from 51 grams to 40 grams. This is an outrage. Still the same price. Peter in Solihull, thank you for your nice comments, Peter, says in the 1960s, a standard Mars bar was typically about 70 grams. So it's now 40, so it's gone down a third since the 60s. Say no more, says Peter. They've taken away our Mars bars. Sarah Pochin is with us, Reform UK MP and MP for Runcorn and Helsby. Sarah, good morning to you.
Good morning, Ian. Lovely to be with you this
And
morning.
it's always nice to see you. Listen, I mean, let's start on this. I don't even know where to begin when we look at this phase one of the Southport inquiry. Whatever way you try to look into this story, it is so deeply disturbing, namely that 3 young kids died and lost their lives in the most horrific way. It was witnessed by other young kids, some kids trying to protect, 6-year-olds trying to protect 6-year-olds. And then there were adults in the room. Many of these other people were injured. Some have life-changing injuries, but all will be affected for the rest of their life as well. And of course, what compounds it, Sarah, is the fact that this could have been stopped.
Yeah, it's horrific, isn't it? Look, I'm a mum of 2 boys. I can't imagine how that must feel for those parents. But this has 2 aspects to it. Firstly, we have the parents of the perpetrator, and of course, they knew, they did nothing. Well, what loyalty have they got to the people of this country? They were immigrants. We've let them in. We've let them live here. And look how they've repaid us. And I think any parental duty, of course, in your heart, you want to do everything to protect your children. But if you have a child that is harbouring knives, ordering knives on the internet, that has effectively been shut in their bedroom for 2 years, you know you've got a problem. And of course, they should have flagged it to the authorities.
And there were many opportunities for them to have called the police and said, look, our son he's out of control. He's got an armoury up there in the bedroom.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, Sarah, just to compound that, the week before the attack, he was off to try and do a different attack, and he was eventually stopped by his dad. So the second time it happened, where they also knew he ordered a cab and took out a knife from the house, they never once called the police.
Yeah, and of course the second aspect is the failing of the authorities. When are we going to stop hiding behind this racism card? People have to feel that they are able to speak out. It is not racist to call out a child that has machetes and knives and is clearly, a head teacher is clearly they know the children better than anyone, the teachers, and is afraid to... well, she raised it, didn't she?
She raised it. This was Joanne Hodson, head teacher of the school. It was a specialist school that he attended. She described having a visceral sense of dread that he would do something, saying she felt every day it was building and building and building. These are her words. And that the school was left holding the baby as other agencies simply peeled away when she sought help. So there was no help for her. When she did raise the issue about what a risk they felt he was, firstly she was told not to use the word sinister. They crossed that out and said the word sinister was wrong and it had to be replaced with the word inappropriate after professional views were submitted by CAMS. She was challenged quite heavily and told no child should ever be described as sinister, which in itself is bizarre. But perhaps the most disturbing part is when she was told that she couldn't sum up the risk of this person because her attitude towards risk around him was because she perceived him as a black boy with a knife. I mean, whoever told her that should be currently serving about 30 years in jail, frankly, Sarah.
And this is the point, isn't it, that it doesn't matter what rhetoric Starmer comes out with following this, and he spoke yesterday in Parliament. The point is, people are not held to account. Who overruled that head teacher? What is going to happen to that person? Because they have, the lives of 3 young children on their conscience, all because they didn't want to be called racist. Yeah. This is absolutely mad. This country now is hiding behind this racist card. People are afraid to speak out and look at the consequences of inaction.
I want to know who the person was that told her that she can't say that. And I wonder I don't know whether phase 2 of this inquiry will go into that. The smart money suggests, Sarah, we'll probably never find the individual. It was probably an agency that collectively put this letter together, or however they imparted their disquiet towards the teacher. I don't know. But the idea that anyone thought that was a correct and appropriate way to respond to a head teacher who's at the coalface of these problems, who's there every day. She's looking at Rudy Cabana, constantly thinking that the threat is building and building and building. There is a huge risk here, and she's told essentially to shut up and keep her opinions to herself, because if you point out that this black kid is, he likes knives, That's a stereotype, and therefore she's essentially been accused of racism.
Yeah, and you know what? Some heads must roll, because even if it ends up being the head of the department that wrote the letter, it doesn't matter. You know, the buck has got to stop somewhere, and until people are held to account. And I mean, I think that should be a criminal charge against that person, not just a dismissal. But until we get tough with this kind of nonsense, then it will carry on.
Let's move to... I want to ask you about Donald Trump. You probably saw this. I mean, it's kind of funny, really, that he published a picture of himself being depicted as Jesus and then said that that's not true. It's a picture of me as a doctor. Now, I don't know how often you've utilised the NHS in the last number of years, Sarah. Like the rest of us, from time to time, you have to. I've never seen a doctor look like that.
Look, I really think this is a bit of nonsense. What's going on here? We've got POTUS v Pontifex. You've got there on your screen. It's ridiculous, really. Look, the fact is we've got global issues. We've got Trump. Clearly, he's got to decide his position and what he's going to do out there in the Strait of Hormuz. You know, there are so many more bigger issues to worry about other than this spat between the two of them. I don't really want to comment on the Pope's line, other than, you know, it did seem very pro the Iranian regime. But look, the fact is that we need to maintain as good relations as possible with the United States. We are utterly defenseless as a country at the moment. This war is going on, and it is a war. And although we are not actively involved, partly because we can't be, we have no equipment to be involved. We cannot support the Americans out there in the Strait of Hormuz. We can't even get a ship out there, one single ship, as we know. But we have to maintain relationships with them. We are defenceless without them.
Defenceless in all sorts of ways. Defenceless to also guard our own borders. Yet again, it's another story courtesy of the Calais police. Standing around on the beaches, Sarah, watching people to leave the shores of northern France, headed for a shiny new life in the UK, courtesy of the taxpayer, of course. Their job, I thought, was to stop... Bearing in mind, it was only a week ago, 4 people died making that journey. You might have thought from a humanitarian position, if nothing else, whatever the legalities, that they would have stepped in. They didn't. They stood there, bucket and spade in hand, I'm sure, just watching them leave.
Look, yet again, we're watching boats arrive full of young fighting-age men from cultures quite different to our own. They are a threat to this country. I believe we should declare a national security emergency. We should deploy our Navy into the Channel if we had a Navy. I mean, can we even push these boats back? Never mind, never mind watching out for the Russian subs in our channel.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure that we've got enough capability to turn around a few dinghies. But the point is, the French are never going to help us. We're the laughing stock of Europe when it comes to our immigration policy. What we need to do is get our Navy in the Channel and turn these boats around.
Listen, on that point, Sarah, thank you very much indeed. Lovely to hear from you. Nice to see you again. That is, of course, Sarah Pochin, MP, Reform UK MP for Runcorn and Helsby. Let's get a word with Matt Vickers. Matt was with us only yesterday on the programme in the first hour, Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party. Matt, morning to you.
Good morning.
Nice to have you with us down there on... Are you on College Green?
We're in Victoria Gardens. The sun is shining.
Right,
it's glorious out here, but there's no cup of coffee to be had.
No cup. I've got one here, though, and a bacon bap, so... And not one of those chicken things you recommended yesterday. We are going to be addressing that in the coming weeks, apparently. Give us your thoughts, if you would, because when we were speaking yesterday, Matt, we hadn't got around to the release of this Southport report, phase 1 of this report, but it is out now. It's from start to finish. It's a litany of horror and disturbing headlines and conclusions.
It's absolutely devastating. And at the centre of it are the lives of 3 young, innocent girls. Their family sent them to a dance class, never dreaming for a minute that this sort of horror could occur. You can't, I mean, it's unbearable thinking about it, and what that family has had to endure and go through in light of this is horrific. It's now on the government to look at what's gone wrong here and to make sure this can never be allowed to happen again. I mean, this report, it clears it up, unambiguous failings on behalf of agencies who failed to spot the signs, clear signs that were given to them, clear intelligence that meant this should have not have been able to happen. And then you hear about the parents and the role that they played, knowing that this vile creature was ordering weapons to his home. Absolutely devastating to see it. It's now got to be a priority for the government. People have to go about their lives in the United Kingdom knowing that this stuff is not likely to happen again. They need to know that the agencies have their back, and all of the investment that we put into those agencies cannot be allowed to fail. We need to get this right.
I mean, we're asking that question about whether parents should face criminal responsibility. We know that in the United States in recent years, I don't know if it's new entirely, but certainly there have been some recent cases where parents have found themselves. There was the case in Michigan where a kid called Ethan Crumley killed 4 students and wounded 7 others. His parents ended up getting charged with involuntary manslaughter for buying their son a gun for Christmas. What the heck were they thinking? While ignoring warning signs about his mental health. They're currently serving 10 to 15 years in jail for that. Now, over here, we don't have such a law, so I doubt whether it could be introduced retrospectively, but we've got such a body of evidence around the ineptitude of Rudy Cabana's parents on this, the amount of knives he had. I mean, somebody makes a point here. Norman says, where did the money come from to buy his arsenal? All those knives, arrows, bows, ricin is not cheap. Yeah, absolutely right. This was a kid with no job. How was he buying this stuff? It was all delivered to the house. The parents knew he had it. They knew he had a morbid fascination. They knew that he had intent on wanting to at least damage and harm people. And on the day that he left the house to carry out the attack in Southport, he'd previously, just a week before, attempted to do something else. He was stopped at that point, but the parents never called the police. I would say they hold at least a degree of responsibility here, Matt.
I think if the details are as horrific as we're reading, and his parents were so negligent in this situation. I mean, it's not even negligence, is it? It's just common sense that you would not allow young people to get hold of such things. I think we've got to, you know, it's for legal minds to look at whether or not they're liable in any way for that. I'm really concerned about the failure of our agencies. The agencies are responsible for looking after people nationwide, looking at all these cases. They have all the information they could possibly need. They are the experts in the field, and where that's going wrong, we've got real questions to ask. This government has to be held to account for it. They have to look at what's gone wrong and make sure that this can never happen again.
But we do seem to be in a world, and this does predate this government as well, Matt, in I don't want to say in fairness, but in just to be in the interest of truth. So we've had it for many years where we keep hearing this line, lessons will be learned. They're not really learned. It seems that institutions in this country are box tickers. They love a database. They like to tick a box, and when they've ticked a box, they pass their findings or their papers on to someone else, maybe in the same office, or they elevate it to another office, and everybody's filled out their nice little forms, and they've ordered the correct paperwork that's relevant to this particular case or whatever. They've all done their paperwork, and then they go home at night saying, right, job done. What no one's doing is joining the dots and coming right out with it, that here's a kid that's out of control. And we've seen it so often, even social workers that have gone to work and said, you know, that house I've just been to, it's an absolute mess, and someone's gone, you can't say that. You can't call that. You can't say it's a mess. You can't call them out on that. Well, sometimes you can, and this has been a constant problem that is sadly wider even than the horrors of Southport.
Yeah, I mean, it's not clear. Lessons must be learned. People need to be able to go about their daily lives in this country without fear of such horrific incidents. To think what that family have gone through is horrendous and heartbreaking. And actually, when it comes down to it, you're right. It's about taking things from being box-ticking exercise to being accountability. People failed to do what they needed to do in response to the intelligence that was available. That's the conclusion of this report. There was clear signs that this was likely Somebody is responsible for looking at that information. Somebody should be held to account for that. These agencies have to have a real look in the mirror and be accountable and responsible for what they've failed to do here.
Will your leader, will Kemi Badenoch, do you think, call this out in the most robust terms? Will she be calling for a criminal inquiry into those that didn't tick all the right boxes, into whether it's prevent, whether it's people telling teachers that they could be a bit racist to even raise the issue of knives and skin colour in the same sentence? These are all very real things that happened. Will Kemi Badenoch call this out? Will she call for a more thorough, deeper inquiry into the individuals involved, Matt?
Well, as you well know, we've got a leader with real backbone, a tough cookie who's willing to stand up and call things out where they need counted out. This was part one of the report, of the investigation. We're going to see what emerges in the rest, and I'm fairly sure you can expect robust action from Kemi on all of this, calling it out as required and making sure we get to the bottom of this and that people are properly held to account for their actions.
But you'd think there would be enough in this first report, and when I looked yesterday at Keir Starmer and Shabana Mahmood making statements in the House of Commons, it was the usual thing. And I'm sure those individuals will say, well, it's all with the best intentions. But when you're reading from a press release or a piece of paper that a special advisor has written for you, it doesn't really, and this, I think, Matt, is a wider problem with our politics. It just doesn't sound as if they really mean it. It doesn't sound as if they're properly invested in the story. I know you have to sometimes, like High Court judges, you have to divorce emotion if you're the Prime Minister to a degree. But we want to see some anger. We want to see some real incredulity coming from the government front benches, that they're not going to take this. They're as mad as hell. They're not going to take this anymore. We never see this from the political classes these days.
This country didn't elect a leader, elected a lawyer. He's not a man who's got the spine and the backbone to care about anything, really. We've seen since he arrived, he changes his mind about everything. But actually on this is beyond politics. It's a really serious incident. It's a really serious incident for the country, actually, and the confidence that they can have in those security agencies and what is and isn't done to protect them. We really do need to look at it. We need to see what comes forward in the rest of the report. It's shown so far an utter failure on the part of the agencies. It needs to be got to the bottom of. Those people need to be held to account for the failings that have been made.
This could be a moment where, and I know it's not about, building a political career on the back of horrendous news, but it's about building credibility as a party that has the answers when there are none coming from the current government. This could be a pivotal moment for your leader. This could be the moment that, her star has risen somewhat in the last few months, I think people would reasonably say. This could be the tipping point, Matt.
Yeah, so I always avoid trying to politicise a situation like this, but I think, do you know what? She's the sort of leader that people need. They want somebody who's on their side, who understands what's going on in this country and what needs fixing. I think it speaks, this incident, some would argue, feeds into a wider problem that we've got in this country about integration, about shared values. And about what comes next, and how we identify in terms of Britishness, what it means for our places of education, for our outlook on the world, and how we bring people in this country together. We stop the hate marches, we stop the division, and we bring British values to the forefront, and people come to be part of this incredible country as it was and as it can be again. Kemi's out there. She's already put forward this cultural and integration commission to look at every detail of this, what we're teaching people in school, the way that our agencies are behaving, and how we actually have a rethink, bring people together, celebrate Britain, bring back patriotism, and forward those shared values to eliminate some of the misnomers, the horrific things that are going on, the division, the hatred, and things that spill out and show themselves in horrible incidents like this.
You got a bit of noise in the background there, Matt. I thought Black Rod had shown up early doors.
The builders are here. I think they're fixing the roof.
It's either that or Steve Bray's got a new instrument, one of the two. Listen, good to see you again in short 24 hours. Back with us, he is Matt Vickers, MP, Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party. Over to you on this one, 03444 499 1000. Lessons will be learnt, they say. She even said it yesterday. Home said lessons will be learnt, but they won't really, will they? Unless you really get a grip of what's gone wrong. You've got to change the way you do business when it comes to institutions, box-ticking, databases. It's not about filling in forms. It's about saving lives, and this government would do well to try and remember that. Let's get a voice note on those lessons. This is from Neil. Morning, Neil.
Good morning, Ian. You worried me a bit there, mate. I thought I'd overslept. The only way lessons will be learned whenever these atrocities happen is if the Home Secretary has to appear in court as an expert witness to tell us why this person was let in, why this person was allowed to do this atrocity against us.
Every Monday to Wednesday, midnight until 1, it is Talkback.
Such a shortage of housing. You've got landlords, right, have taken that on board, and it's an absolute disgrace.
Your stories, your opinions, it is your chance to have your say. So they're literally just being rented out as hotels, basically.
Yeah, rent a load of hotels.
Well, that has really shone a light for me.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lots of calls and comments coming in from you. Good morning. It's Ian Collins in for Jeremy Carl here on Talk Breakfast. We've got the disturbing stuff, and boy, is it disturbing out there this morning. The phase 1 of the Southport inquiry report. Reacting to that, here's Barry in Norwich. How you doing, Barry? Morning.
Good morning, Ian.
Hiya.
How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. What are your thoughts?
I'm putting my head in my hands when I hear about these. Yet another inquiry, yet another real lessons, and and all the rest of the claptrap that you get. Do you know what I mean? After these inquiries finished, the problem is no one's ever held to account, ever.
Yep.
Yeah, right. You see it in the Hillsborough inquiry. You see it in, like you said, that young baby P.
Yep.
You see it. Do you know what I mean? It goes back. It goes. And
Lessons could be learned. It's the same thing every time, isn't it? No one says, right, you were responsible.
Yeah, people have moved off and allowed to retire early with their gold-plated pensions. You know what I mean?
That's usually what happens, isn't it? Somebody gets told, right, OK, they're no longer with the department, but nobody actually says it was literally your directives that you could have avoided this, and you took a different route and therefore chose not to, ultimately.
And then you should be sacked, and you should not get your pension. But and until there is actually people in the dock, whether it's police officers, social workers, school teachers, doctors, do you know what I mean? Even like that last caller said, the Home Secretary. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, right. And people are actually locked up. This will continue to happen because people get away with it.
Anyone who did something that contributed to this needs to be held to account. It's not about just insanely putting people in jail, but they need to be, some maybe, but they need to be held to account at some level.
And when these things happen, when these outrageous things happen, like they did to them 3 children, we don't want to be told that it's a school choir boy from Wales. Yeah, right. We need to be told the ethnicity, whether he's white, black, Asian, whatever. Yeah, right. Yeah, we need to be told the ethnicity, the age. Yeah, right. Where he comes from. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, right. And people need to start being honest and transparent, because the public, don't trust politicians. Full stop. They don't trust the authorities. Yeah, right. Because they cover up things all the time.
Well, indeed. Well, we might have been. I mean, I know there's an argument about how much information the police can give out. Sometimes there's good reasons, sometimes there's not. But they could have saved themselves a whole bunch of gyp in the streets if we'd learnt more about who this person was to start with.
Yeah, and you see it with the rape gangs. Do you know what I mean? With all the, the withholding of information, people covering things up, and refusing to have inquiries. And, it's all right having these inquiries where they go on and on and on and on and on, but we need to see people in the dock, or like you say, sacked from their jobs and losing their pensions, and held to account, and people knowing who these people are. It be made public that they've been sacked and they've lost their pension. Yeah, not just moved on to a different department where they carry on.
Well, they tend to, there's a sort of, especially the ones in higher positions, they tend to be, there's a lot of sort of rubbish leaders out there, really, in different areas, but they build a career going from place to place. When somebody who's the leader of a council, and the council's like bankrupt to the tune of about 50 billion quid, and so they get rid of the leader of the council, and the leader of the council pops up as the leader of another council somewhere else.
Yeah.
How does that work? How would you, surely, on your CV, I was a failed leader of a council, that would preclude you from even applying for the job, let alone getting the darn thing.
Well, the problem is, in this country, you get rewarded for failure. And that's in the public sector.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? You see it with the Prime Minister we've got at the moment. I mean, you talk about leaders. I mean, God almighty. Yeah. In the public sector, you get rewarded for failure, and it's as simple as that.
Well, it is as simple as that, and I think it's because there is a kind of the archetypal old boys network where everybody in these institutions sort of knows everyone or knows someone who knows someone, so they get taken from that post and everyone says, oh, how good this person is, and no one ever sees any evidence of this brilliance. It never manifests anywhere. You talk to staff on the shop floor, they certainly don't see it, and then the person gets a whacking pay rise, nobody else gets a pay rise, then they leave because they're rubbish, and then they just get a job and do the whole thing all over again. Barry, you make some great points. Thank you very much indeed for that. 0344 499 1000. The absolute crime scene that is the public sector. I'm not kidding you. It is off the scale. I just touched the sides there with 20 seconds worth of rant. It is beyond comprehension what happens in terms of financial rewards for those that know now. If you muck up in the private sector, you've got targets to hit. You've got, in the commercial world, you've got targets to hit. You've got success to demonstrably prove. And if you can't do either, you're gone. You're gone. Nigel down in London. What have you got, Nigel? Good afternoon. Good morning, rather.
Good morning, yes. Indeed. Good morning. Well, I think your last caller made some very valid and good points. Sure. I think we have to understand some very important factors here.
Yep.
When we hear about there's lessons to learn, let's not forget the Metropolitan Police is 169 years old. Oh, sorry, 196 years old, I beg your pardon. And they haven't learned anything. All we keep hearing from them, for instance, when another cop gets arrested for rape or convicted for coercive behaviour and rape and sexual offences, we can learn from this. Well, they haven't learned in 196 years. It's the same with social services. It's the same with all government bodies. No one learns. And it's an insult to us in this country. It's also an insult. There's no transparency and honesty. So when people say, oh, well, the police can't tell us this, they can't tell us that, well, they need to learn to tell us this, because if you don't, in my business, in news, in your business, it fuels speculation.
But how much? We never used to get that information. And if you go to, there's some countries around the world, I mean, I'm thinking namely Portugal, for example, when the whole Madeleine McCann disappearance was unfolding and the Portuguese police were accused of not giving out enough information, and their response was, that's not how we police. We've never done it like that. We don't see any reason why we should. This we find to be the more efficient way. Now, we can pick holes in that one way or the other, but what is the net benefit to always knowing the ethnicity of a alleged perpetrator?
Let me give an example.
Yeah.
In recent months, the Met Police, as an example, under the guise of the College of Policing, have changed the way they deal with you and me as journalists. So, in other words, I ring up and say, I'm at a crime scene outside such and such a premises on the Finchley Road. Can you send me some lines? What sort of incident is it? Can you give us some more information? Well, I'll just give you the information. What else do you need to know? Yeah. They've got a CAD machine to look at. They've got a control room they can ring, but they try to filter it away from us. Yet social media will often throw out everything beforehand. A classic example of this is, sadly, when that young man lost his life in Primrose Hill, a neighbourhood watch group put everything out on WhatsApp before the police even had a chance to do anything.
Yeah. Well, social media, journalistically, is your best friend for about 4 minutes. When people are naturally reporting that they've seen something. And then after that, you get all the kind of invention and the lies and the conspiracies. But for those initial minutes, there are times when, you know, whether you're talking about an uprising in Egypt years ago, things that can happen you only know about. Even Iran, for example, you know, that only came on my radar because I literally saw it on social media.
Yeah, I think the other thing we have to understand is, in this country, which people seem to accept, there is no suitable justice for victims of crime. So people who commit serious offences aren't robustly sentenced to a sentence which one could argue is suitable for the crime they've committed. Now, in the United States, where I live, I mentioned this several times before, sentencing there is extremely robust and extremely tough, where, for instance, a family member can offer a witness statement and make a suggestion via the district attorney of sentencing regimes. And people say, well, people still offend. Yes, well, people still offend, but that person won't be offending for 25 years to life or even longer. So the point is, you remove the element of those who offended. And I think that if people commit malfeasance in a public office, for instance, and withhold information or lie about information, they should also be prosecuted.
I 100% agree, and that's why I think this should be the tipping point. I feel like I'm repeating words that I've said 1,000 times now. This should be the tipping point where the likes of Kemi Badenoch, this government won't do it, stands up and says those that are involved in either withholding information, not sharing information, or stopping others for curious reasons of race sensitivity coming forward with information, all of those people, we want you down at the Old Bailey on August the 10th or whatever it is, because you're facing trial for misconduct in a public office. Nigel, I've got to move. Thank you. Great calls coming in, 03444991000. Should parents be held responsible for the actions of their kids as well? We're also exploring that subject. More great voices on the way, and you can message us 87222. It's just gone 25 to 9. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed Talk. Welcome back. The home of commentator Ian Collins in for Jeremy Kyle for the next couple of weeks. Russell says, really good interview with Lord Carlisle. Having listened thoroughly, I'm assured that absolutely no lessons will be learned and no one will face the consequences of not doing their job properly, except those in the general population who will be the victims. Incident after incident happens, and people like Lord Carlisle say the same thing while sitting on panels of complete inaction, just the same as the rape gangs. Yeah, Russell is bang on that. Lord Carlisle unwittingly, so we had him on to reflect on, he's previously given advice and views on Prevent, so we had him on to respond to the failings in this respect. And unwittingly, he kind of became part of the problem as I was interviewing him, because the problem was the type of response, the kind of clinical, pre-prepared response. The don't worry, we've got it sorted. We've got a database for that. We've got a form to fill in for that. The Prime Minister's responded brilliantly. No. It's all of those areas that I think are collectively the problem we have. Nobody will really call it out. And I know, if you called out every accusation of ineptitude, you'd have a blimmin' riot on your hands every day of the week. I understand the issues, but it doesn't mean to say that when things are serious and horrific as Southport, we don't step in and say this is wrong and these are the people responsible. Let's speak with Charlotte Littlewood, former counter-extremism coordinator for the government and former Prevent practitioner, who can probably help us out a little bit on this. Charlotte, are you angry this morning? Hello to you.
Good morning. Unfortunately, I'm just unsurprised. As you well know, there have been a number of Prevent reviews. We lost our counter-extremism strategy and apparatus some few years ago, and the changes that have needed to happen for Prevent, which in the main really is about training Prevent practitioners to be more bold in their job and to understand their job better. This just hasn't taken place, especially even following the William Shawcross review that set that out very clearly.
What do you imagine then would have... I mean, look, you can't speak on behalf of those practitioners and those that were involved specifically with this case. So somebody comes to Prevent and say, we've got this kid and all the signs are that something really dangerous is going on. We can't establish that he is part of a specific group, which, by the way, seems to be central to the problem here. We can't establish that he's got affinity with, ISIS or the IRA or anything like that. But we know that there are terrible things happening, and we know that we've got enough evidence to know this man wants to do harm to others.
That should have been a referral straight to the multi-agency safeguarding panel channel. That would have been the case in the 2 boroughs that I've worked in previously. And for a good number of years now, we've had a category called mixed and unclear ideology. So for those that don't really fit a typeface, there is an escalation process for that. So I find that a bit lacking in the discussion so far around the issue, is that, Prevent hasn't adapted to the new space. No, that's not true. You get multiple trainings across the year from the Home Office on any emerging threats and groups. As the far right started to change, so you were called in for training on the different groups that are emerging. So it's not true that Prevent hasn't adapted and isn't adapting to the new threat landscape. It's more about a confidence within this particular local Prevent team about escalating to channel. I would assume that the Prevent team itself has a lack of confidence in seeing that Prevent is safeguarding and has a timidity around escalating cases up to channel. Perhaps they see it as something that is more forceful than they should. This is about safeguarding. It is a part of the...
Why would they... Sorry to interject on that point, Charlotte, but why would they be timid about advancing what looks... And I don't know at what point in Rudy Cabana's criminal activities that it was initially referred to Prevent, but we know there were 3 attempts at this. What would have to be on the kind of file, as it were, for someone to say, this is not for us?
There was, and I've spoken about this before, and it does come up in Shawcross's report too, a mindset across a number of pockets of the whole organism of Prevent. So a mindset of timidity in which there was a misunderstanding around this, that this is safeguarding, that you're not giving someone a criminal record if you're referring them, although there'll be a deconfliction with the police to make sure intelligence services are not already dealing with this individual. This is not sending someone to prison. And despite that being so clear, and the Prevent teams being trained on that and then being sat within safeguarding teams, there was still this sort of culture around it that it was something harsher than more general child services, that it was something closer to the criminal space.
So this felt potentially to somebody from Prevent, they might have looked at this as the police officers on the bus that were called to, this lad is found on a bus with a knife, and when the police say, what do you intend to do with it? He said, I intend to use it, and I also want to poison people. But he wasn't arrested because he was treated as a vulnerable child, and it became so they never ever went. If they'd arrested him, gone to his house, they'd have found an arsenal of weaponry, and that might have changed the entirety of this story.
I mean, that is the other side of the coin there, that you then see the cases all as vulnerabilities rather than there being threat. And there has to be both. But I think if one sees prevent as a hard hammer and a hard tool, if you're working in prevent, you are going to be less likely to refer into channel because you're not seeing it as something that's going to help that person and move them away from the risk that they also pose to others. And it's both. This person is a risk to themselves and needs to be safeguarded from themselves, but also is obviously a huge risk to others. And I think the fact that prevent sits in that space, that's what causes that timidity, because you're not just taking someone from an abusive father and safeguarding that person. You are both safeguarding that person and safeguarding others from harm.
Okay.
So that causes, if you're not the right person in preventive, and unfortunately I don't want to point my finger too heavily at this local team, but I don't like the excuses that prevent doesn't have the ability to deal with mixed and unclear ideology. That's just not true. So there is a local failing here. There was a lack of boldness to refer to channel. So I think there needs to be local internal reflections about that, and training again to those in prevent about how important channel is and how it can save lives, and that if you have a case that you have any concern about, just discuss it in channel. It takes an extra 10 minutes in that morning at your channel meeting to discuss an extra child.
I mean, there is I have a slightly, maybe it's an unconventional view on this compared to what most commentators are saying this morning. I'm not absolutely sure it ever needed to get to prevent. I mean, does that make sense in some curious way?
Well,
there was enough basic criminality around this person to have stepped in before it needed to be elevated there. It might even been not the relevant body to
Absolutely.
raise it.
There are different roads into where this could have been prevented. Obviously, my expertise is prevent, so I know exactly how that works, and I know exactly how that could have worked and could have been very effective. And obviously, there have been 3 referrals that weren't escalated, so prevent is getting a lot of heat. But absolutely, there are multiple ways in which this could have reached the right intervention. But it just so happens there were 3 prevent referrals. The school was actively seeking help from the local authority, and I find that really hard to see that the school could see it and the local authority didn't respond appropriately.
Which is extraordinary, isn't it? I know this isn't specifically your area, so we're slightly off track, but the point is, just human to human, it's extraordinary that a school would raise something. The people at the coalface of the problem, seeing it every single day, where the head teacher had actually said that it was a daily occurrence, a visceral sense of dread. There was a real sense that every day it was building and building. Their school was left holding the baby. Other agencies sort of peeled away. You know, when a head teacher raises that, I mean, that's as much as a head teacher can do. They can just raise the concerns. That head teacher was told that there might be something a bit racist also about what she said. But even if you put that to one side, which we shouldn't, but for the purposes of this conversation, just a mere sense, a visceral sense of dread. I mean, how else can a head teacher impart that to the next authority?
Yeah, I mean, they couldn't have done more to make 3 referrals. And you see the referrals are getting more and more desperate as they're being made, because the first one was clearly about violence, online searches, really horrific online searches. And then the second one was about a social media post supporting Gaddafi. So you can see that they're just like, oh, here's something that might get through to prevent.
Yeah.
We just need help. So that's really hard to read. So the report is a really hard read. And all I can say is that in my experience across 2 London boroughs, this case would have reached channel and it would have been discussed across the agencies, and they would have communicated. They'd have realised they've all had something to do with this individual, and it would have been handled differently. So from my professional experience, I would say this is a localised issue. Prevent absolutely can adapt to new threats, and it should, and that just means training the prevent practitioners on the new threats as they come, and it must do that, and it should do that. But this is
unless everybody steps up their game, we're going to have another I think
you have regular training, okay? So it's multiple times a year. It's about 3 times a year that the Home Office will train you on new threats. And then the issue is, though, you are placed inside a local authority. So whilst your Home Office trained, you are plopped inside a local authority that has all of its political issues, all of its political with a little p issues as well. Like, does this team get on with this team? And are you actually positioned in the same building? Do you meet each other as you go through the hallway? There's all sorts of things that impact on one local authority being better at this than another. But I think they need to look at the structure of the safeguarding team. Is Prevent in the same office as the biggest, wider safeguarding team? Do they meet each other enough? Do they have confidence in each other? Is the wider safeguarding team trusting the Prevent team? There's so many small things that could have gone wrong to create this breakdown of the process.
Was there a kind of a sense of sensitivity towards ethnicity when collating information or databases? Because this case appears, I don't know what happened when it got to Prevent, but that certainly at the school teacher authority level that we just talked about, it was there. Did that raise itself anywhere?
So,
were there meetings? We've just got too many brown people on the list. That's not going to be a good look. Did that come up?
That didn't come up, and I find that quite difficult to believe. It's not something that I've ever come across. It's not something that then came up in any of the Prevent reviews so far. What did come up is, and I did experience, was a timidity around dealing with Islamist extremism. And that had multiple reasons. That was fear of looking Islamophobic. So it kind of touches on the idea of fear of looking racist.
So it did, in that respect, that really was the spirit of my question. So it did raise itself.
Yeah, but not on a skin colour.
Okay, all right. But
in a...
Yeah, you're looking for...
And it was political as well. It was a concern that if the local authorities themselves were too heavily involved in tackling Islamism, they would be seen to be anti-Islam and they would lose any of the Muslim vote that might be important to them.
So that's harrowing, isn't it? It's terrifying that was ever a consideration.
Yeah, that is a real problem for Prevent because of the way it's structured, putting the Prevent teams in local authorities, and local authorities care about the elections.
And that's still on. That kind of working practice, do you sense, is still there?
Yeah, absolutely. Until they restructure and give Prevent teams some independence from the local authorities, they're going to end up having an issue around the local authorities' elections and support from the community and how they look optically for certain communities that they might rely on for votes. Yeah.
Because I noticed over the years that more and more cases of right-wing, what they call right-wing extremism have come onto the radar, and I'm not in any way diluting that, because that should be treated with the equal horror and be dealt with seriously. But when I looked as far as I could go and looking into some of the cases, which might have been a 16-year-old at school using inappropriate language, and I'm thinking, well, that might be a flag, but I'm comparing it to a load of people who blew up tube trains, London Bridge, Westminster, goodness knows where. I'm not quite seeing an equivalence here. There was a sense that someone was trying to force an equivalence, essentially to balance the books. Is that fair?
There have been occasions where I think there is a forced equivalence, but not when it comes to the referrals that are coming in. That's more about A, reflection of a threat that is there, but B, also less barriers to referring around the far right. So you don't have the fear of being seen as Islamophobic for that kind of referral. You don't need to worry as a local authority about political fallout for that kind of referral. There are far less barriers to a referral around the far right.
So it's easier to stick a white right-winger on a database than a brown Islamist?
That's a very crude way of putting it, but that aspect is there, yeah.
On that point, Charlotte, great to have you with us. Thank you. Really informative stuff. And let's speak again. Charlotte Littlewood, former counter-extremism coordinator for the government, used to work with Prevent. That was an interesting point to finish on. This is Talk.
Every Monday to Wednesday, midnight until 1, it is Talkback.
Such a shortage of housing. You've got landlords, right, are taking that on board, and it's an absolute disgrace.
Your stories, your opinions, it is your chance to have your say. So they're literally just being rented out as hotels, basically.
Yeah, rent a load of hotels.
Well, that has really shone a light for me.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed Talk. Welcome back. Ian Collins in for Jeremy Kyle for the next couple of weeks. Loads of stuff still to come, another hour or so to go. It is that time, however, approaching 9 o'clock. Let's get the latest sports headlines.
20 seconds from the sun.
Gary Stonehouse is with us, Northeastern Yorkshire football reporter with The Sun. Nice to have you with us, Gary. It was an absolute nightmare for United last night. Cracking night for Leeds, though.
What a night for Leeds, yeah. A huge step towards survival for Daniel Farke's men, but you just feel like it's a crushing blow for Michael Carrick's prospects of getting the Man United job full-time. You know, he's complained post-game about the sending off. It was a little bit soft, in my opinion. But let's be honest, United were awful first half. Leeds were all over them. And the game had arguably gone already before that incident anyway. Bad night for Man United, terrific night for Leeds, and an even worse night for Tottenham.
Well, I mean, the bad news just keeps on coming for Spurs, doesn't it? Tell us more.
It does. I was there on the Stadium of Light on Sunday to see them, De Zerbi's first game. And do you know what I actually thought first half? They battled well, but the confidence just isn't there. And as soon as things start going wrong, the walls just started caving in. Deflected goal when your luck's not there. You know, you can't catch a break. And then to lose the captain, Romero, he came up in tears. You had a feeling then that you could sense he knew his season was over. As you can read in The Sun today exclusively, it looks like that is the case. He was spotted yesterday with a knee brace on.
He's not playing this season, right? That's fair.
That's the case, yeah. He's out of the dogfight, and another big problem for Tottenham.
Another big problem for Tottenham, amidst many others. Listen, Gary, thank you. Gary Stonehouse from The Sun with us here on Talk. Let's get the latest news headlines. The time, 9 o'clock.
Over the past 36 hours, the United States and its partners have launched Operation Epic Fury, one of the largest, most complex, most overwhelming military offensives the world has ever seen. Nobody's seen anything like it. We have hit hundreds of targets in Iran, including Revolutionary Guard facilities, Iranian air defense systems. Just now, it was announced that we knocked out 9 ships plus their naval building, all in a matter of literally minutes. Iran's formerly supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, is dead.
I spoke to you about the situation in the Gulf and explained that the United Kingdom was not involved in the strikes on Iran. That remains the case. The basis of our decision is the collective self-defense of long-standing friends and allies and protecting British lives. That is in accordance with international law, and we are publishing a summary of our legal advice. We are not joining these strikes. but we will continue with our defensive actions in the region.
Mr Farage, would a reform government have allowed US forces to use UK air bases for offensive operations in Iran?
Yes is the answer to your question. I would have said to the Americans, please do use our bases. We will be supportive of you on this.
There were a series of very loud blasts in the area of Dubai that I'm based in. That's in the marina area. It's a very touristy area, actually. Those blasts were the loudest we've heard yet, but equally we are reassured that they are most likely the sound of interception by the UAE's quite sophisticated THAAD interception kit. That is the Terminal High Altitude Area Defence System.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. It is the home of common sense. Ian Collins in for Jeremy Kyle. It's a very busy hour. It's absolutely packed. I'll make you one promise to try and cram the whole thing into the next 60 minutes or so. We will, of course, be majoring still on phase 1 of the report into the Southport attacks. Published yesterday, the chair of the inquiry, Sir Adrian Fulford, released 800 pages of what is, by any measure, incredibly disturbing reading for a number of reasons. There is so many elements to this story. Reference the parents, authorities, teaching, policing, the list goes on. We'll come back to that in a moment. Continue to take comments as well on Donald Trump, who's had a row with the Pope. Then he published a photograph of him as Jesus. He said, no, it wasn't me as Jesus, it was me as a doctor. I'm not sure that's a doctor. I think that's Donald Trump dressed as Jesus. It's quite funny, nonetheless. I don't think anyone was harmed during this interaction between the Pope and POTUS. And French police yet again accused of doing absolutely nothing on the borders of Calais as they stood by and watched many fighting fit young men jump on boats and sail away for a brand new life in the United Kingdom. All good work down there in northern France. Oh, and we've been talking on a much lighter note. The Mars bar has actually got smaller. It was 51 grams. It's now going down to 40 grams. I called that as a drop of 10%. Although Maria says it's 20%, not 10%. No, it's 10%, isn't it? If it was 50 grams and now it's 40 grams, that's 10%. That's why Maria didn't get called for a contestant job on Countdown. I swear. Either way, it's gone down, but they're charging the same. Shrinkflation is slightly the more serious point around this. Well, bearing in mind there's a cost of living crisis going on. We can talk about chocolate bars. You talk about washing powder, baby food, goodness knows what else. That's, the grammage has gone down. The price remains the same. Your thoughts on that? 0344 499 1000. Let's speak with Chris Phillips, former head of National Counterterrorism Security Office and ex-Met Police DCI. He's going to join us in just a couple of moments' time. First comments from you. This from Sharon in Suffolk says, I'm having to take a card to the post office this morning with ID for a specialist vegetable peeler for my arthritic hands to be able to use it, as it needs to be signed for due to it being sharp. As that boy, Rudy Cabana, was under 18, his parents must have had to sign for his packages. So yes, the parents should be culpable in this case. There was some, I seem to remember some information on that specific point a little while back. I don't know whether that's come up in this inquiry so far, but certainly yes. I mean, that is absolutely correct. Chris Phillips is with us. Chris, good morning to you.
Good morning, Ian.
Nice to have you with us. I mean, it's a grim day. The reading of this phase 1 of this report is, I mean, it's horrific from start to finish. I mean, we knew it was going to be, but it's very revealing. It's very thorough. I think that the chair of the inquiry has done an incredible job on this phase 1. There's more to come, of course. But what he identifies there are very specific areas where you can point the finger. I think the parents are at the top of that list. that he marks out, but there are other authorities. Prevent are in there as well. Now, whether it should have ever even got to a Prevent story is another issue. The fact is it did and was rejected 3 times. What is going on, Chris?
Well, he probably wasn't a terrorist. That's the issue with that situation. But what this shows up is actually the gap. And we've been saying this for years. Mental health, dealing with mental health and the mental health units are just not up to speed.
Yeah.
The police have been often left carrying the can for mental health inadequacies. And there are so many stories of people who are literally going mad on the street, have been taken into hospitals, sectioned, and then released pretty much immediately. Because there's not the resources, but also because they just don't want to deal with them.
A friend of mine who was in the Met like yourself, he said that, you know what, depending on what shift he was on, anything after 4 o'clock was almost always going to be drug or drink related in some shape or form. But the common factor underpinning almost every arrest he made was some kind of mental health issue. Nobody really knows, he said, what to do. You know, you can take somebody to hospital. If they look as if they're going to harm themselves or others, then, you know, they may in extreme circumstances be sectioned, but that's not something that happens on every shift or by the hour, etc. There's not really... The joined-up thinking that people talk about is hard to employ when nobody really knows. You know, I've got a person, if they technically committed a criminal offence, but underpinning it is, you know, clearly they're completely affected by some kind of psychosis as well. So what comes first, the criminal offence or the psychiatric breakdown? Where do we then go? Is that a hospital job? Is it the local authority? If they're of a certain age, is it social services? Is there a roadmap for this stuff? And if there isn't, there surely needs to be.
Yeah, well, there is a roadmap, but the trouble is that the services that are a part of that roadmap have had their funding taken away. You know, you may remember 30 odd years ago, there were hospitals, many mental health hospitals around the country. In Epsom, there were 2 or 3 that were there, and they were there to deal with people who've got these kind of issues. They've all been closed down. And of course, then you'll have heard of the care in the community, and then what goes next is the people that do the care in the community are then taken away because of a lack of funding. So you've now got a situation. I mean, every street, every main city centre that you go into in the UK now, you'll find people sleeping rough. Most of them have got some kind of a mental health issue that's not been dealt with. And these people are roaming our streets, and we're not doing anything about them.
And in order to do something about them, one would assume, in respect of this and other areas that, you know, come to light from time to time, the most harrowing examples, it requires arguably a total recalibration of how we do business as a country. The various institutions and establishments and authority areas, this needs a whole rewiring, doesn't it?
Yeah, but the point is the system was there previously. We've now got a situation where, as your friend says, at 4 o'clock every day, police officers are looking after people who've got mental health issues, and that's not their job. That's not what they were there to do. You know, the telephones 5 o'clock on a Friday night. You try getting hold of a mental health social worker, it's almost impossible. So who has to deal with it? It's the police. And then we criticize the police for not doing their job.
Yeah, exactly. So there is some... It's like we've got all the apparatus, but it's all in the wrong order, or it certainly needs more money funding into it. So, so mental health services should be 24/7, right? I mean, there's no closing for Christmas, but some of these helplines and even centres are not even open.
Yeah, but it all does come down to funding. I don't blame them themselves.
No,
for
of
this.
course. Yeah, I get
it's
that.
A situation where we've taken funding away from these things. We've taken funding away from mental health care. The hospitals have been closed. Care in the community. I mean, I've been to houses where people were just literally taken out of mental health hospitals, and a group of them put into shared accommodation. And then one social worker was having a pop round every day or every other day to make sure they'd taken their medication. And then the people were missing. So then that spills out onto the streets. And the vast majority of mental health things that happen just aren't huge bits of violence like we've seen here, and Callaghan up in Nottingham. They're not as bad as that, but they are destroying the fabric of society, because we've got these people roaming around who need help, who aren't getting the help they require.
So I mean, a cynic might argue, Chris, that actually that this isn't, what is happening isn't accidental in many respects, that the governments and the authorities have taken the path of least resistance. And the path of least resistance is oddly the chaos that you've just described. That is actually preferable than trying to deal with it, because to deal with it will cost several billions of pounds every single year. The number is growing because mental health cases are increasing. So strange as it might sound, the status quo, as we have now, is actually easier to deal with than trying to put it all back together again.
Yeah, it does require funding, and so does everything else. And the government are the arbiters of what they spend the money on. This is one of those things. You know, nothing will happen for 5 years. Things will happen, but they won't make the media like this tragic case has, and the one in Nottingham. You know, and suddenly it becomes top of our agenda. But we all know, Ian, that we've got problems on our streets with, as I said, people sleeping rough. If you speak to the charities, they will say almost every one of those has got some kind of a mental health issue that they need help with. And it's not as easy as just giving them somewhere to sleep. It really isn't. And we've got to spend on this kind of thing, and policing as well. You know, all these things require. If you want an ordered society, then you've got to pay for it.
And I guess, as you rightly say, Chris, not every, you know, most of these cases are not cases of something lethal or horrendous happening, but you only need that to happen once. And it's not unreasonable to suggest that all the while we retain the current position and the funding is lacking and the amount of resources that are needed are lacking, then the potential for another Southport or similar is all too real.
It is, and the sad thing about this, as we've seen many times, particularly in the terrorism field, but similar to this, is copycatting. And you know, I've just done some work with a number of schools who are really concerned that they're going to have someone come in to attack their children. So it's, you know, this, and of course the fear that goes through society, and it's not reasonable that we put up with this kind of level of violence, but we've got to do something about it, and we've got to fund those groups that are there to stop it from happening.
Yeah, spot on. Chris, thank you. Great to have you on with us. Chris Phillips, ex-Met Police DCI, also former head of National Counterterrorism Security Office. Thank you to him. The problem, just to compound the problem, so you'd think, right, OK, they're short of money, they're short of personnel as a result of the fact they're short of money. They're short of buildings and areas where you can assist people with severe mental health problems, again, as a consequence of there being a shortage of... So everything's short. But on top, just to make it worse, so as if that couldn't be bad enough anyway, you've got all manner of curious weirdos working in some of these institutions who are playing the race card. And they are. We've seen it in Nottingham. Oh, be careful. You know, you don't want another non-white person in that particular secure unit because that looks bad on the numbers. The database will show disproportionality. Rudacabana, same thing. Head teacher says, look, this guy's a risk. Somebody turns to the head teacher and says, I think you're only saying that because it's a black guy with a knife. Can't really say that. Essentially accusing the head teacher of racism. So on top of all the existing problems, as Chris Phillips just brilliantly identified, on top of all of that, you've got these half-wits who are playing some dubious game of diversity, DEI and politics with people's lives. Who are those people? Because that's who I want to winkle out. They're the people that I want the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary to identify. That's what I want Kemi Badenoch as leader of the opposition when she gets the first opportunity to stand up and say, yeah, sure, you've talked about all the issues around this Prime Minister. What about those behind the scenes? Will they face... Will you have the same anger that you had for Southport protesters? Will you have the same anger for the ineptitude, the lethal ineptitude of those that work in the various agencies that were all connected to this but did nothing because no one wanted to take responsibility? And will you firstly pinpoint, please, the specific person who essentially called the head teacher a bit of a racist for bringing the point up about colour and knives? If you do that, then maybe we can take you seriously. That's Badenoch's absolute prime job number one on the list, on the to-do list. When she gets that opportunity, she must raise that. 0344 499 1000. And we're going to be talking in a second as well about the new EES travel system that came into full effect just days ago. This has caused absolute chaos across airports. What is it? What does it mean? And will your summer holiday be wrecked if you haven't got your ducks in a row? Meantime, with lots of response coming in from you on Southport, particularly Southport, no apology for really focusing in on that one today. There's been huge concerns, a lot of tears and upset, as you would imagine, on such a tragic, devastating story. Lots of comment on this. Let's get a voice note from Lisa. Morning, Lisa.
Morning, Ian. It's Lisa from Canterbury regarding the Southport story. All the people that they've obviously known and listed who did not do their job, why aren't they being held to account? Why aren't they being picked out? And why isn't Keir Starmer doing something about that? That little weasel turned up there with his little wreath of flowers that I'm just looking at now, and stood there for 5 minutes, turned his back on everybody and walked off. Horrible little man. The sooner he goes, the better. Thank you.
Conflict breaks out anywhere in the world, it has consequences here at home. Talk War is your definitive national security briefing. From the conflict in Ukraine to the tensions in Gaza and the latest escalation with Iran, this is where you'll find comprehensive comment and expert analysis with multiple updates throughout the day. The Talk War podcast from Talk, available on the Talk app or wherever you get your podcasts. Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, welcome back. Homer Common Sense, Ian Collins in for Jeremy Kyle for the next couple of weeks here on Talk Breakfast, 9:20. Francis in Llanelli says, morning Ian, Lord Carlisle used the word disappointing when describing the failure of Prevent in relation to the Southport murders. Disappointed is when you miss a bus or lose a bid on eBay, not the slaughter and attempted slaughter of young children. Francis, thank you. I thoroughly concur with that. I did identify that Lord Carlisle's position on these things was part of the problem. It was a very much establishment kind of reply. There's not just a certain set of words that figures like Starmer and Hermer and Lord Carlisle, those kind of people, it's the way you reply, as if having a sobering, allegedly dignified, measured response is all it takes. They've dined out on that for years. It will sound very sensible if I say this in a somber voice. I'll sound as if I'm... No. Get angry. Sometimes get annoyed. Be apoplectic. Sometimes spit some feathers. Because that's what it needs on a story such as this. 0344 499 1000. Let's move to Another story as well. This may have missed your radar, I don't know, but it may well affect it going forward. The EES travel system has come into full effect just days ago, causing a lot of chaos across Europe over the weekend. Huge queues at border control meant some passengers were forced to miss their flights, while others waited hours to leave the airport. Some travellers reported vomiting and passing out as they tried to get through the new biometric and facial recognition checks rolled out under the new European entry-exit system. Let's speak with Simon Corder, travel correspondent for The Independent. Simon, morning to you. I mean, this was quite a lot of chaos. Just explain, firstly, what is this new, what seems like Star Wars-like impenetrable system that's been put into place?
A good way of summing it up. This has actually been rolled out for the last 6 months. What changed on Friday, though, was that the European Commission said, right, every frontier point, every traveller has to be registered on the entry-exit system. This is a central database that basically just says, right, Ian Collins entered the EU at Paris Charles de Gaulle on the 12th of April, and he left Amsterdam on the 14th of April. And the way they do that is to, on your first registration, take the 4 fingerprints from your right hand and a facial biometric. That goes into the digital register, and then after that you are supposed simply to have your facial biometric checked, which is actually really swift, or it can be. And I've heard actually good reports. People going into Palma at the weekend were asked very simply, have you been registered? And if they said yes, they were told, just go to the e-gates, put your passport in, you'll be through in seconds. And that worked. But other places, in particular Italy, I am sorry to say, are having massive problems. So we're talking here about an EasyJet flight from Milan Linate Airport to Manchester. And those passengers, I've spoken to a number of them, turned up hours ahead because EasyJet said you've really got to. Of course, it's a problem if you've got to check in luggage, because those don't open often until 2 hours beforehand. And once they had got through, they went to passport control, but they were just told, join a line and wait here. And they were having to do that basically because for some reason the airport authorities were allowing passengers for the Heathrow and Gatwick flights to go through, but not the Manchester one. Eventually, that plane, the airline tells me that the pilots had to go, otherwise they would have run out of hours. It left with 34 people on board and 122 empty seats. Wow. And those 34 were entirely people who had perhaps Italian or Irish passports, EU passports, because you get a fast track, and people, it is said, who fibbed, saying, oh, we're going to London, and they were let on. Everybody else just left behind, left to their own devices.
That's extraordinary. I mean, what they could have done is just employed that old-fashioned thing called common sense and gone, right, OK, we've got some teething problems with the system. You've all got a passport, so that's not in dispute. All go through.
Yep. Exactly. Look, they were demanding that people who'd already had their fingerprints taken on the way into Italy were then fingerprinted again. Of course, this takes forever. It just slows everything up. But you're quite right. They could even have a member of ground staff taking a picture of the business page of your passport, and then afterwards get the work experience people, yes, to tap in your details. That is perfectly feasible. There's all kinds of things, but I've talked obviously to the airline. They say we're very sorry for any inconvenience caused, but nothing to do with us. You talk to the airport and they say, yeah, sorry about this, it's down to the airline, talk to them. I then talk to the Association of British Insurers and they say, no, we don't cover that sort of thing.
Oh, great.
And so people who have spent over £1,000 on emergency flights to get them back are simply out of pocket.
That is extraordinary. I mean, why do we need this system, firstly? Because we've got passports. I mean, they already exist. That's a legal documentation. They're expensive to get. You can wait forever on a bad month to receive it through the post. It's a legitimate documentation. Why do we need fingerprints and pupil facial recognition? And on that point, Simon's face froze. I think what happened there, the minute I said the word facial recognition, he travelled so much that he just morphed into a photographic pose, ready to be pictured. Maybe it was that. There's a lot of things I don't get about this. I mean, I know the short answer. The answer you'll only ever get from airlines and politicians is that it's all about security. It's all about security. So, I mean, this is walnuts and sledgehammers, kids. I mean, this is right up there. Putting aside for the fact you can jump on a rubber boat at Calais and just nip over to the UK and spend the rest of your life here without any documentation. I mean, is it really needed? I was making the point. We got you back, Simon. I mentioned the phrase facial recognition and your face froze almost on command. It was extraordinary.
I know, it's scary, isn't it?
So, all right, it's almost like a Pavlovian response you have to those two words.
I apologise for the technical issue. That was absolutely at my end.
OK.
And I've issued myself with a P45.
I've contacted Ofcom, but that's another story.
Look, OK, so you wanted to know, why do we need this system? Well, the EU, like so many other places, including the US, the UK, Australia, Canada, wants to know more about people who are coming in and going out. Can you believe the UK was originally involved in the planning of the entry-exit system? So we always knew this was coming down the track.
Sure.
It's just after the Brexit referendum, we said we'd like to be third country nationals, and so we'd like to be subject to this, and that's what's been happening. But the EU has made an absolute shambles of rolling it out. The individual countries basically do their own thing, and while some of them are being very good, many of them are not. And if you happen, for instance, to go down to Dover today, you will find that the queues are incredibly long. That's because French IT fell over earlier today. Loads of problems there. And those, you know, you've probably seen them, these big tall kiosks like overgrown Daleks that you get in various places. Those are not working at the Port of Dover, at Eurotunnel in Folkestone, or at London St Pancras, hub for the Eurostar trains. And that's because, well, the French can't wire them up to their system, and so they're just standing idle. It's an absolute mess, and I'm afraid people who are travelling this summer just need to be aware that it might happen. And the best policy, apart obviously from having an Irish passport, is simply to get to the airport really early and hope for the best. And probably you'll be sitting around drinking overpriced coffee for a few hours.
So I had, yes, indeed, overpriced is the right word. So I had this in America year before last, went in and got stopped by the guy, did my fingerprints and face, I think. Curious moment with a border security guy, an American, who managed to simultaneously do what I could only... I thought this was a sort of Britain's Got Talent thing. He was able to chew what looked like about 32 grams of Bazooka Joe bubblegum while simultaneously drinking a very large Starbucks coffee. And I thought, how is he doing that and not swallowing the gum? It's incredible. Yeah. Anyway, so I was kind of slightly sidetracked by this curious sort of facial thing that this guy was doing. Had my fingerprints done, had the face done. Now I'm thinking, if I go back to America tomorrow, I don't need to do all that again, right? I'm in the system.
Look, fingerprints are a bit old school. They're very popular in Europe, but they're not so much in America. You go back there, I bet they will just spot you because they've got cameras. They'll just spot you and you'll walk up and they'll say, "Oh, hello, Ian. Nice to talk to you. Would you like some gum?" Because their facial recognition is so good that if you're a regular traveller, they just know who you are. They won't even want to look at your passport because they say, "Well, we know you're Ian Collins. We know when your passport is valid till. We know you've got an ESTA. In you come."
So they don't even need to look at the passport because my face
very
is
often
done.
they'll just say, "We're not interested."
So that's the theory behind what's happening in the EU.
No, what's happening in the EU is it is very, very clunky, even though it's going digital.
Okay.
And my strong expectation is that in 10 years' time, when we're talking about this, and hopefully my Wi-Fi holds up, we will be talking about how, you just breeze along to Paris-Charles de Gaulle and they'll say, "Oh, Ian Collins, in you come." Yeah. And we've counted, and you've spent 47 days of the last 180 in the European Union, so you're okay. This is a kind of transient technology, but it's absolutely infuriating for people simply because some are missing their flights and the airlines don't want to know. and neither does everybody else.
But if I go back, like if I went to France next week and then I went a week later, would I have to go through the whole rigmarole again of my fingerprints and my face?
Once you've had your fingerprints done, that's supposed to be it for 3 years, and they will just go on your facial biometric.
Right.
But every country is making up their own rules, and the Italians have said, no, you might have had it done on the way in, we're going to do it again on the way out. Oh dear, you've missed your plane.
I mean, talk about create bureaucracy when you really don't need it. I mean, I guess the theory that's always thrown out, it's the one-size-fits-all word security. But, you know, you kind of think, well, we've got passports already. We all also know that anyone who's got nefarious intent will find a way to subvert any system in some shape or form, fake ID, whatever it is. So it seems like a lot of bureaucracy involving millions of people in order to potentially once every 25 years catch Ted the terrorist.
Well, the EU says that they've caught thousands of people who were overstaying. They also say that they've actually picked up several hundred people who were kind of on the wanted list or were definitely not wanted in Europe. And so that's been a success. And they say it's all about security and just get used to it. And by the way, you voted for this, which in a sense, I'm afraid, Ian, is absolutely
Well, it's true, but it doesn't mean that the system is still perfect, because it's clearly anything but. Is it going to mean like a sort of visa, like an ESTA form that we're going to need to go to the EU now?
Very good question. That's the European Travel Information and Authorization System that comes into effect 6 months after the entry-exit system is working perfectly. So heaven knows when that's going to be. You'll get plenty of warning. Until then, just do what you are told and hope that you make your flight.
So if as a journalist I wanted to go to Calais, watch people jump on a boat without any identification, visas, passports or anything, coming to the UK, I'd need to get fingerprinted, facial recognised and a visa to go and do that, to watch people without any of that coming back the other way.
Yeah.
That's bonkers.
Well, them's the rules, Ian.
I'll just go in your suitcase like we've always done, Simon, but don't tell anybody. Always good to have you on, Simon. Simon Calder, he is, of course, travel editor over there at The Independent. Thank you to him. Lots more still to come. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
25 to 10. Don't forget, of course, Julia Hartley-Brewer is here at 10 o'clock this morning. I can tell you, I've seen the industrial team that are working diligently behind the scenes for Julia's show. It's going to be an absolute banger of a programme, journalistic term. 10 o'clock this morning, Julia is here. She'll nip in before then and tell us exactly what is going on. Let's get a voice note on all things related to Southport. This comes from Lisa. Morning, Lisa. In fact, comes from Sarah. I do apologise. Sarah, morning.
Good morning, Ian. It's Sarah from Croydon. Just listening to the lady talking about Prevent. I just hear words, and I know she's not there to defend them or anything, but I just hear words. I'm sorry. At any given moment, even myself, without Prevent training that they apparently attend 3 times a year, even I would know this kid was a wrong 'un. End of. It doesn't matter his skin colour. It doesn't matter his methodology, his ideology, whatever. In the beginning, the blatant facts are this kid is a wrong 'un and he's going down the wrong path and he needs to be stopped. All the other questions come afterwards. The fact is he should have been stopped. I used to be a teacher, and I'm just not sure. I'm not blaming the head teacher, but I'm just not sure I would have let it go. I have a duty of care to all of those other kids. I'm just, goodness me, I'm just speechless. I'm speechless. And until we acknowledge that there is a problem with who we are importing into this country, until we acknowledge there is an issue here, this will never go away. The people in the establishment will never fix it because they can't acknowledge there's a problem.
That is very thorough stuff, Sarah. Thank you very much indeed for that. And you've rather woven together quite a lot of the themes we've talked about this morning. Let's get a word from Home Affairs spokesman for Reform UK, Zia Youssef, is with us. Zia, good morning to you. We had that first phase of the report yesterday. It's a kind of A to Z of horror, not just in the clear and demonstrable detail of what happened, but to compound all of that, the failings of system after system that surrounded this horrific case.
Well, I'm sick and tired of it. It's horrific, obviously, to have to read, and obviously my heart goes out to the victims' families. Those lovely, beautiful girls, I think, should be alive today, and there's a good chance they would have been alive today had Prevent not failed so catastrophically. And look, the reason why I'm so angry about this is I read cover to cover Sir William Shawcross's report that was only a few years ago, remember, into Prevent, where he said, and I quote, that Prevent had an institutional hesitancy in dealing with Islamist extremism, which is one of the most crushing indictments one could give what is supposed to be a first line of defense ultimately against terrorism, when 3/4 of MI5's caseload, no less, is Islamist terrorism. He went on to say that Prevent had largely become a social working enterprise. And what did we learn from the report yesterday? Well, that more care and attention from Prevent seemed to be going, much more actually, on the mental health of Ruda Cabana, the monster, than went into keeping the British public safe. I could go on. I mean, the fact that Ruda Cabana had been referred on 3 separate occasions and no proper home search was done. Now, I can't know for sure, but I think it is a very reasonable assumption that one could make that had that home search been done, they may well have found the ricin that they found after these poor girls had been murdered. They may well have found the Al-Qaeda manual that they found after these poor girls had been murdered. I could go on. It's spectacular failure. And people listening to this go, well, look, we get report after report, we get inquiry into inquiry, and nothing ever changes. That's why I've said the prescription that I've laid down, if Reform wins the next general election, here's what we will do. Number one, all of Prevent's resources will be allocated based on MI5's caseload. So if 3/4 or more of MI5's caseload is Islamist extremism, then you better be sure as hell that is where Prevent are going to spend their time. It is not going to be a social work program anymore. It will be a first line of defense to stop extremists from killing innocent British people. That is what it is supposed to do. Secondly, anyone who is referred by 3 separate corroborating authorities to Prevent will get an automatic, mandatory, I don't care how woke the employee might be, they are going to be forced to search that person's home by a matter of fact of law. This is what we need to do. We need a whole cultural change inside that organization. And I want to say this too, one of the most tragic things about so much of this is that, the fear of being called racist has become more powerful in this country than the fear that one might actually allow a brutal, savage murderer to kill innocent people. Remember the Manchester Arena bombings?
Yeah.
The testimony of the security guard, I still remember this because it's so vivid and horrifying. The security guard said, yeah, I saw him. I saw the perpetrator. I saw the bomber. He looked shifty. I was going to move in and do something, but I didn't. Why? Because he was worried about being called racist. How many more innocent people might be alive today had that not been the case? So I'm sorry. I'm very angry about it because I've read that report from a few years ago, cover to cover. And not only have things not improved, they've gotten worse.
Well, we had almost a repeat of that same racial sensitivity issue with Nottingham, because, of course, they felt there was a disproportionate amount of non-white men in this particular institution. That didn't sit well on the database. I'm sure they even had an alarm that went off to say, no, you can't do this, which is criminal, the fact that that was even considered an issue. And then again, it happens with Southport, where you had a head teacher getting told off for even putting the words black man in the same sentence of knife as knife was enough for somebody to say to her that her attitude to risk around him was only because she perceived him to be a black boy with a knife. I mean, this is outrageous. I mean, whoever wrote that to the head teacher should be facing some kind of charge.
Yeah, look, I totally agree with that. And, the consequence, we've got to remember what the consequences of this are. The consequences of this are not just somebody's hurt feelings, right, or some money. It is the brutal murder of, in this case, innocent little girls who are just going to a Taylor Swift concert. And, you see this throughout law and order in this country. Look at the reason, why is there so much knife crime in this country? One of the reasons is because we don't use stop and search in any meaningful quantity. Why is that? Because people are terrified of being called racist. Because if you use stop and search, as Reform would do, in knife crime hotspot areas, what ends up happening, if you look around the world, you see that, yes, people of certain ethnicities are more likely to be stopped and having a routine search from a polite and respectful police officer. That is true. But here's what they don't tell you. Tragically, the blood that soaks the streets as a result of that knife crime is invariably of those very same minorities. And if you speak to a mother, as I have done, and her son thankfully survived, but was attacked viciously with a machete. If you ask her, would she rather her son was respectfully inconvenienced for a few minutes by a police officer, or to dramatically reduce the chances she would ever get a knock on the door, with the worst knock on the door and message any mother could ever receive? I'll tell you what her answer was. She said, absolutely. And all of the evidence from around the world shows stop and search work. So look, people watching this show, people listening to this show, it all makes sense to them. What we have not had now for decades is politicians courageous enough to say, no, I don't care what the database says about the ethnicity of these people. We care about one thing and one thing only, and that is keeping British people safe. And that's what you'll get from Reform.
Zia, how do we challenge the sort of ideology? It's what has come up from this phase one of this report is that, I mean, even putting Prevent to one side, all of the other agencies and institutions, whether it's the police, whether it's to do with schooling and the various establishments that surround where schools have to report, none of these people were really talking. They sat down, they had meetings together, for goodness sake, but no one would ever was ever able to assess or work out who specifically was wrong on this. And the report described it as being an absence of risk ownership. No one took command or leadership. No one would say, yep, this was on us. Each different department, each different voice or person filled out forms. They ticked some boxes. They wrote a cursory conclusion. But nobody joined it up together and nobody said, yep, this one's on us.
Well, you've got to have new leadership. You've got to have proper guidance and leadership, not just inside the organisation, but politically. You've got to send a clear message to the staff. We've got your back. That's what Reform are going to do to our police officers. We're going to say, you're doing a really difficult job. Everyone's got their smartphones out. They're trying to goad you. Well, we've got your back, right? And you should not police one group of people of one ethnicity differently to another because you're worried about being called racist. Do your job without fear nor favour. With Prevent, we would do things like I said. If you get referred by 3 separate corroborating authorities, you will have your home searched. That will happen regardless of what anyone else might think. And then really importantly too, we've got to, as you said, address the culture around all of this. And I think the most important thing is that we have organizations like this that understand, as I said, Prevent is there not to be a social work program. It is there to be a first line of defense. We should ask ourselves, how is MI5, to their enormous credit, been able to foil so many terrorist attacks? It's because they know acutely what their task is. And it's clear when you read these reports, not only do a lot of Prevent not know what their task is, to the degree they know, they think it's the total opposite of what it should be. They were more worried about the, quote, mental health of the savage murderer, Axel Rudikabana, than they were about the safety of innocent British people. And so actually that's a relatively simple problem to solve.
One of the issues we've been looking at as well, something that America has started to explore here, is that of parental responsibility. Should parents be held criminally responsible for the actions of children? We know from the report into Southport that the inquiry chair may, in fact, put to the top of the list the parental aspect of this story. They knew their child was a problem. They knew there were weapons in the house. They knew he constantly held knives in large collections of. They knew what he was about. They knew this is what he wanted to do. They contacted no one. Should parents become criminally responsible? Would that happen under a reform government?
Well, I think we'd have to look very, very carefully at something like that. You know, there are important English common law principles that come into play there. But as much as I think that there is some merit in assessing that sort of thing, I think it lets the authorities off the hook. Again, this was not a complete bolt from the blue. The Southport killer was referred to Prevent 3 separate times. The independent report into Prevent just a few years ago savaged Prevent, saying that they had all of these institutional hesitancy in dealing with the most obvious threats to the British people. So I'm sorry, I think to some degree, I understand why people want to go there, because it makes your blood boil, because clearly those parents could have stopped this from happening. That is without a doubt. But I think what it's up to politicians to do is to make sure that the organs of state, literally being paid taxpayers' money to keep British people safe, do not betray that mission.
While you're with us, Zia, I'd be failing not to get a word from you, if you could, on the Cops of Calais, which sounds like a new Netflix show, doesn't it? It would be quite farcical if it was one, because yet again we saw it a day out at the beach for the old Bill of northern France. That's what it seems like, standing by while boats leave. Many people jumping on those boats, hundreds probably yesterday, heading for a shiny new life in the United Kingdom, courtesy of the taxpayer, while the police stood by and did absolutely nothing. What is going on over there? Even by French standards, this is bad.
Well, you know what? The French are laughing at us. The French are laughing at us. They've been laughing at us for a very long time. British taxpayers have paid them, at the behest of Tory and Labour government, 700 million quid, 700 million pounds to, quote, stop the boats. And what's happened? Boat crossings have gone up to record highs. It's a complete farce. And so what we've got to focus on is secure our own borders. Stop relying on other countries, firstly. The idea that we should be asking other countries to secure our own border is utterly insane. We shouldn't be paying France protection money at all. Take away all the ridiculous incentives. So maybe we should stop giving illegal invaders free taxi services to free, in some cases, 4-star hotels, and free healthcare and free meals and free activities to safari parks. Maybe we should stop doing that and take away the incentive. What we also need to do, by the way, aside from obviously doing those things, is to round up and detain and deport everyone who has already come to this country illegally. And say, if you do, not only are you never going to be allowed to stay, you're just going to be detained and sent back to the country from which you came. If you do that, they will stop coming. So let's stop paying France any more money. It's embarrassing. But I'm sorry, look, of course the French, if you're going to if somebody offers you hundreds of millions of pounds to do basically nothing, you're going to take that money, aren't you? So I'm afraid, as much as obviously France's behaviour is abominable here, we've got to focus and direct our anger and frustration with our own leaders.
I know Reform, Nigel Farage has talked about there being a kind of national inquiry into immigration. Boris Johnson is wanted as a witness on that one, perhaps other figures as well. Maybe some of your own MPs would be on there as well. Mr Jenrick, Suella Braverman too. They were part of course, the Home Office in varying respects. Would they make the witness stand?
Well, the whole point of the inquiry is to understand how on earth, after the Tory party committed in 4 consecutive manifestos in elections that they didn't win, to cut immigration down to the tens of thousands. How they managed to unleash 4 million people, only 17% of whom came in on work visas, into this country. It is without a doubt one of the biggest political scandals of all time in this country. And so we want to understand how on earth that happened. And so an inquiry will speak to everybody who was involved in that process. And nobody is more delighted that such an inquiry would happen and the bright disinfecting sunlight necessary going on this issue than Suella and Robert. Suella's yesterday morning tweeted out, by the time she became Home Secretary, she was Home Secretary for a very short period of time, as you know, before she was turfed out for saying something that's obviously true, that there was two-tier policing in this country. She said that already 1 million visas of the Boris wave had been handed out. The Boris wave was already in full flow, about to hit a crescendo, and she did everything she possibly could and was simply overruled by the Prime Minister, the Tory Prime Minister, who had no interest in securing our borders and wanted such levels of immigration. So that's what the inquiry's got to get to the bottom of. Who made those decisions and why, so it can never happen again.
I remember her resignation letter where she did allude to all of this. Essentially, she gave it a good go, but was stopped by the system that was in place, couldn't do what she wanted to do. So when critics are rounding and saying, she was Home Secretary, but as you say, not for a long period of time, and she did outline in quite unprecedented detail as to why there was a problem in the Home Office. Maybe some French police officers could be on the witness stand as well, Zia. Are you hopeful you could get some of those over? Just to explain the thought process of why you stand on a beach and watch people jump on a boat and leave your country, even if it was from a humanitarian perspective. 4 people died last week in the Channel. It seems no reason will get the cops of Calais moving when it comes to those jumping on rubber boats to sell to the UK.
That sounds like a very good idea indeed.
Yeah. I like it. I mean, I'll help you with it. I don't mind. I'll get them over. In fact, they don't even have to worry about getting over. They just jump on one of those rubber boats.
Yeah, well, I don't know how much jurisdiction the powers to compel will take us to, but we'll do everything we can. Look, it's the thing with immigration in this country and the border's betrayal and the overwhelming, actually, of this country with mass immigration. It's a scandal within a scandal within a scandal. Sure. And that is why we, as I said, we've got to get to the bottom of how on earth probably the biggest electoral betrayal in this country's history, in terms of where a party said time and again they were going to do one thing and then did not do that. I know that happens in politics, but to do so much the opposite in such vast numbers, it's permanently altered the culture in this country. And as we pointed out, if they are all allowed to get ILR, then it's going to have a permanent negative effect on the future of British people and their children and their children's children.
Zia, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. Have a great day. Zia Youssef, he is, of course, the Home Affairs spokesman for Reform UK. Responses to him, of course, 0344 499 1000. Interesting. Will the French police be called to give evidence at an immigration inquiry? I would love to see that. I mean, there is a serious underpinning to what is, in any other world, would just be comedic, but there's nothing funny about this story. More from you on the way. Julia's in as well to tell us what's going on her programme. It's 5 to 10. This is Talk.
He's just trying to take credit, Keir Starmer, isn't he?
This man is not a leader. He's not the statesman that our country needs. He's failing us at every single level.
Donald Trump understands that Keir Starmer is fundamentally not a patriot.
Yeah.
He's not on the side of the West. He's been appeasing the Iranians in order to shore up his vote in this country.
In front of me is Waitrose, and I'm about to head in there. I literally openly put the stuff in my bag. I nervously walked to the front door, and away we go.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Welcome back. It is the final couple of minutes. Let's get a quick voice note on that new EU entry-exit system. This comes from Shirley. Morning, Shirley.
Good morning, Ian. It's Shirley in the Cotswolds. Ian, I suspect that this shambles at the border control in Europe is all part of the cunning plan for us all to say, oh, please, let's get back into the EU so we're not ruining our holidays standing around for hours in airports. It all adds up to the same. We're heading back in, and it's what the EU are torturing us for. Bye, Ian. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. And nodding like a sage-like owl. Julia, that's a wise owl.
I couldn't agree with her more.
Yeah.
Oh, it's all just spite. It's absolutely, and the fact that all these airports, they have the right, legally the right of the EU. If there's massive queues, it's all going a bit, frankly, tits up. They can just basically say, right, forget the biometrics, carry on through, and they can ease it, and they don't. And when they choose not to, we should take the message. If they don't want our money, they don't want our tourism, fine, you won't get it.
That's why God invented the Isle of Wight.
Although
you're going to have
as much sun as you'd want.
As much sun, fabulous holidays down there at Cowes and Ryde and places like that. But of course they could have just employed some logic, couldn't they?
Couldn't employ enough people.
Oh, there's a big queue. There's a plane about to take off.
Or let you
You've
do
got
it in
your
advance
passports.
before your holiday.
Yeah, you see.
Well, the thing is, they may not care about us, but the airlines are going to be kicking up a massive fuss.
Well, you'd think so. So